Chapter 258. In the eyes of the three elders, he was not just foolish. He was as foolish as he could be. Every year, there would be an endless stream of people who would visit the Sword Collection Palace and request to join. There would be people who would kneel outside the palace all year round, refusing to eat or drink to show their sincerity. Some people would even kneel to death, but they would not be accepted. The Green Vine elder tried to persuade him. Zijian, you've stayed on my Green Vine mountain for so long. You can say that we're fated to meet. Originally, I wanted to pass on the secret techniques of the Green Vine Mountain to you so that you could become the future sect master. Today, I sincerely advise you to go to the Sword Collection Palace. Both you and your family will benefit greatly. If you miss this opportunity, you'll probably regret it for the rest of your life. As he spoke, he had already become 30% more polite and 70% more intimate with Yu Zijian. Originally, he found Yu Zijian's talent to be quite impressive, but he had never thought about raising her to become the sect master of the Green Vine Mountain. He only spoke like this to sow goodwill. However, that was not completely a lie. Right now, the disciples of the Green Vine Mountain had withered away, basically all slaughtered. If it were not for the matter with Fu Qingjin, he really would have taught them wholeheartedly. Fu Qingjin said nothing. All he did was stare at Yu Zijian silently. He had always given off a sense of dignity that allowed him to order people around, or he would not have been able to convince the three elders so easily. It was rare for him to show such sincerity, which made it even more difficult for her to turn him down. Yu Zijian lowered her head and pinched the corner of her clothes. Her knuckles whitened. She was not good at turning down the good intentions of others. It was not that she could not distinguish between good and bad. Seeking benefits and avoiding harm was human instinct, and she was not so stupid and stubborn that she had to go to the 100 schools of thought with Hua Qinglu just because of a single sentence. However, her true feelings were something that others could not imagine. The life and death of that imposing figure, who had saved her time and time again, was still unknown. How could she leave just like that? He planned for his own future. If he remained in the Clear River Prefecture, even if it would be useless, he might be able to see him again. This thought, it was deeply rooted in his heart. I support you. Gu Yenying patted Yu Zijian's shoulder and smiled. Fu Qingjin's eyes narrowed, finally revealing displeasure for the first time. The path of cultivation depends on one's own heart. You can't force it, whether it's fated or not. How can it be decided by your mouths? I am a Hawkwolf guard. In order to uphold the laws of Great Xia, even the Sword Collection Palace can't abduct someone right in front of me. Yu Zijian said in a hurry, "It's not abduction. It's me. It's me." Fu Qingjin looked at her deeply. Raising his head, he let out a long sigh and said, "Forget it. It's probably because the time hasn't come. You should stay here for now. You'll eventually come to the Sword Collection Palace and do what you should do." He then bowed to Gu Yenying. "Please take good care of her. Commander Gu, don't let anyone hurt her." His gaze swept across the others. "If today's matter is leaked in the slightest, don't blame me for being merciless." The Green Ruin's sword let out a dragon's cry in the sheath, radiating with killing intent. It filled the entire venue. The Sword Collection Palace was not without enemies. Those who could become the Sword Collection Palace's enemies were all enemies. Those who could become the Sword Collection Palace's enemies were definitely the most terrifying of enemies. If they learned that the next successor of the Violet Cloud's sword had ended up here, they would definitely nip them in the bud. The three elders felt slightly pained. They were 3 Foundation establishment cultivators. Yet in Fu Qingjin's eyes, they were not even as important as a young girl. However, in the long run, they really were not as important as this young girl. Gu Yenying smiled lightheartedly. I can guarantee that. Fu Qingjin clasped his hands again and turned into a streak of azure light, taking off into the horizon. In a single moment, he had already vanished. He did not drag his feet at all. He was extremely decisive. Gu Yening also took her leave. Before she left, she said to the three elders, "I can see that there's a hint of death on your faces. It's best if you're a little more careful in the future." The three elders' faces all became ugly. The golden pheasant elder laughed dryly. "Don't tell me you know how to read faces, Ma. Am?" Gu Yening smiled. "I don't. I was just saying. There's no need to take it to heart." The four of them passed through the formation on the mountainside. Cold wind swept over from all directions, ruffling their clothes. Yu Zijian and Hua Qinglu walked hand in hand at the front, while Gu Yening and Hua Sengzan lagged behind. All they heard was Hua Qinglu constantly calling Yu Zijian an idiot, and "an idiot," while Yu Zijian constantly retorted. Gu Yening and Hua Sengzan looked at one another and smiled. Gu Yening said, "I'll leave the child in your care once we reach the Clear River Prefecture." Hua Sengzan lowered his gaze. "Don't worry, Commander. I know what's best for me." Gu Yening smiled. "That's disrespectful if you don't look at the person you're talking to." Hua Sengzan raised his head in a hurry. There was a rare sliver of panic in his bright eyes. He knew that Gu Yening had something to say to him, since she did not directly take off. Gu Yening had already gazed at the sky, at the unfathomable, obscure place where the stars resided. Fu Qingjin, ha! Just this decisiveness alone makes you worthy of being the successor of the Green Ruins sword. Out of the 18 commanders under me, your cultivation is the lowest, but in terms of resourcefulness and meticulousness, none of them can surpass you, so I obviously don't have to worry about you. However, you lack decisiveness. Since ancient times, all those who have achieved great things have always lacked a sense of courage and decisiveness. Hua Sengzan said, "I don't seek to achieve great things." Gu Yening sighed emotionally. Apart from Millipede this time, there were 2 other demons. They really are extraordinary. If it weren't for Fu Qingjin, the 3 old men would basically have been finished off. As soon as Gu Yening arrived, she only heard a simple explanation from Hua Sengzan before she directly went to stop the Spider Queen's revenge. Hua Sengzan had already written an extremely detailed report on the herb gathering ceremony of the 3 mountains. He had yet to submit it, so he used it to change the topic. "Oh, what are they like?" Gu Yening did not mind, but she still asked in passing. "One of them is extremely large and humanoid, but he has ox horns on his head, ox hooves on his feet, and a tiger's tail. He has scarlet hair and scarlet eyes. He should be the offspring of a demon hybrid. The other is a tiny skeleton. Somehow, he ended up in the Green Ruins illusion. His swordsmanship is superb." Gu Yening raised an eyebrow. The figure howling in the snowstorm on the ice-sword cliff naturally appeared in her mind. She had quite a deep impression of Li Qingshan. Just what are they capable of dealing with Foundation establishment cultivators? According to her memories, just a year ago, Li Qingshan was still a demon that had not even condensed a demon core. It was impossible for him to threaten Foundation establishment cultivators. Hua Sengzan saw how Gu Yening was interested, so he told her everything he had seen. He was eloquent, describing everything that had happened back then vividly. Even the 2 other people involved, Hua Qinglu and Yu Zijian, could not help but stop and listen to him. They would even interrupt him from time to time and add in a few words. Gu Yening thought, he sure has progressed rapidly. In just a single year, he's reached such a level. In other words, the complete annihilation of the Qi practitioners underground was probably due to his schemes. The fact that he could take this step so quickly surprised her even more than the progress of his cultivation. The master of the Sword Collection Palace was right. The difference between humans and demons only existed in a single thought, but just how many people could make such a decision so easily? Gu Yenying said, "Do you still remember what happened outside Qingyang City last year?" As if a chatterbox had been opened, Hua Sengzan went along with what Gu Yenying was saying, as if he wanted to stop some of his thoughts. "Of course I remember. It was old Wang's treat. Oh, right. The kid you rewarded with a cup of wine is called Li Qingshan. He really did join the Hawkwolf Guard." Gu Yenying was immediately surprised. Originally, she thought Li Qingshan had already completely devoted himself to the path of demons, unable to forget about his unintentional actions in the past. Now, it really had come to fruition. She remained unfazed as she listened to Hua Sengzan. With that, Hua Qinglu had even more of a right to speak. She could not help but take over, telling him about the situation when she met Li Qingshan on the island of Cherishing Flowers. He actually practiced qi. Just what was this kid trying to do? Gu Yenying's interest was piqued. Li Qingshan wanted to go to the 100 Schools of Thought, the main camp of cultivators in the Clear River Prefecture. Only there could he continue venturing deeper into the world of human cultivators. Only then could he convert over 1,100 treasures pouches on him into the resources he needed. Only then could he have the opportunity to refine pills from the spiritual herbs he had gathered. All of this required him to use Li Qingshan's identity and Zhou Wenbin's recommendation. Of course, this was not without some risk. He would not be able to avoid the investigation of the Hawkwolf Guard, but according to the information he had obtained from Qian Rongji, the Hawkwolf Guard had not treated him as a criminal, so there was a great chance for him to fool them. The worst-case scenario was actually just a Foundation establishment cultivator coming for him. He had reached the second layer of the tiger demon, so he was confident he could escape from a Foundation establishment cultivator, even if he was no match for them. If that really happened, then all he could do was burrow underground and find a hidden place to enter secluded cultivation for a decade or so. He was already very close to Demon General. Chapter 259. Qian Rongji heard about Li Qingshan's plans. Wouldn't that be walking right into a trap? The first floor of the school is in the Clear River Prefecture. They won't spare you, nor will they spare Little, and unless Little enters the 100 Schools of Thought as well. That's exactly what I was thinking. The sect might be powerful, but they can't directly harm me in the academy. Li Qingshan rubbed little Anne's head. With her talent, entering the 100 Schools of Thought should not be difficult. Qian Rongji said, "The 100 Schools of Thought are the foundation of the empire. It's the place where sects can't interfere the least. The most dangerous place is actually the safest place. There's still some time before the entrance examination. What do you plan on doing?" "Secluded cultivation," Li Qingshan said calmly. He wanted to use the resources he had obtained to break through to an even higher realm of cultivation. In this world, only strength was the greatest guarantee. Smart. There's a special dwelling for secluded cultivation on the mountain. As long as you don't leave the mountain, the school can't do anything to you. This was another reason why Li Qingshan chose to return to the Hawkwolf Guard. The world of humans was different from the world of demons. The laws here were much more complicated and strict. Without Milliped's protection, the Hawkwolf Guard was much safer than underground. Li Qingshan was completely capable of moving from one safe place to another, avoiding conflict with the sect right now until the day he possessed the strength to do so. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that he had to find a footing on the mountain. Whoosh! Qian Rongji smiled. "Leave this to me. I'm a commander after all." Leaving Little and in the room for the time being, Qian Rongji cleaned herself up in front of the mirror. Without applying any makeup, she brought Li Qingshan to see the current Black Eagle commander. Li Qingshan felt like Qian Rongji had changed a lot. She was basically no weaker than him. She no longer had any of her flirtatious charm, nor did she possess the arrogant temperament of a young lady when they first met. She seemed to have been cleansed, becoming dignified and elegant. But this change, rather than saying that it was because she had comprehended something, it was more like she was adapting to the new environment and putting on a new disguise. It was only because of the secret that this disguise became harder to see through, and her heart sank even deeper. The value of the art of charm was fully displayed in her hands, and it was not as simple as seducing men. And Li Qingshan kept in mind that this woman was definitely not a good person. Ordinary evil people might still be able to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot, but only the wisest and the stupidest never change. Ordinary people would be confused and hesitant, and only the smartest and the stupidest would be able to persist and not change. Although he didn't like this woman, he had to admit that she could almost be considered intelligent. Once this kind of person decided on something, it was almost impossible for her to change her mind. It was currently early in the morning, so a few Black Wolf guards emerged from their respective buildings to eat. Li Qingshan noticed that most of them were strangers. Qian Rongji explained, "After you left, we recruited a large number of people to fill the gap. The scene was very intense, but it's a pity that you didn't get to see it. However, you don't need this kind of scene. Life and death. Good morning, Commander." The newcomers all greeted Qian Rongji very warmly when they saw her, but they were rather surprised when they saw Li Qingshan beside her. This young man was also a Black Wolf guard, so why had they never seen him before? What was his relationship with the commander? As for the few people who recognized Li Qingshan, their reactions were much more intense. They widened their eyes and became dumbfounded. Jiaping City's 2 Hawkwolf commanders and a group of elite Black Wolf guards had basically been wiped out. Tracing back to the source of this all led to Li Qingshan. "Good morning." Qian Rongji replied with a smile. She was as friendly as a big sister next door, which gave people a good impression from a single glance, yet they could not help but feel some respect towards her. Li Qingshan felt like even if he told these people about Qian Rongji's viciousness right now, no one would believe him. He thought of a saying, people who were truly shrewd would never act like they were shrewd. As a matter of fact, they would seem much gentler than regular people. Zhuo Zhibua was nowhere close to this in the past. When a venomous snake hid its venomous fangs, or even the fact that it was a venomous snake, that was when it was at its most terrifying. "Commander, who's this kid?" At this moment, 4 or 5 Black Wolf guards blocked their way. They were all hostile. The person in the lead was a 5th-layer Qi practitioner man. He seemed to be in his 30s, and his face was extremely ugly. He studied Li Qingshan curiously. Qian Rongji said, "This is your senior." "Huh, he's not even fully grown yet he's already my senior. We sure have a lot of seniors. There's women and children. Women should be below men." The ugly man and the Black Wolf guards beside him laughed aloud. In the beginning, Li Qingshan thought it was some senseless jealousy, but at a closer glance, he discovered they had come for Qian Rongji. The ugly man in the lead was also a 5th-layer Qi practitioner. He probably refused to accept Qian Rongji's position as commander. Li Qingshan had guessed correctly. In order to fill up the ranks of the Hawkwolf Guard, as soon as possible, they had relaxed their standards this time. They accepted people from all walks of life, so it was inevitable that there would be a mix of good and bad people. The ugly man had never been kind. He came from a tiny sect, and he had gathered a group of seniors and juniors to specifically kill Qi practitioners. He did not touch ordinary people, which was why he had not made it onto the blacklist. Just like Qian Rongji, he was also a fifth-layer qi practitioner. He believed his cultivation was profound, and he had the support of a group of seniors and juniors, so how could he be willing to submit to Qian Rongji? As a result, he provoked her many times and undermined her authority. Qian Rongji frowned slightly. She seemed both wronged and helpless. The Black Wolf guards that passed by were all displeased, but they dared not say anything. They sighed inside. She was far too gentle. Li Qingshan glanced at her. Looks like this move of yours isn't enough to convince everyone. Her forbearance and disguise were far too skillful, which made some people feel like she was weak and easy to bully. The ugly man pointed at Li Qingshan. Kid, you'll follow me in the future. Originally, he planned on recruiting as soon as he arrived in the Hawkwolf Guard and pulling all the new people into his group. However, this damned woman was weak, but she knew how to rope people in, which instead made many people hate her. He needed to properly fuck her sooner or later. Suddenly, he saw how Li Qingshan was quite strong at the fourth layer. He was young and easy to control, so he became interested in roping him in. Li Qingshan said, "Piss off. Big brother, this kid doesn't know how to appreciate kindness. You're looking to die." The ugly man was furious too. Just when he was about to retort, he suddenly met Li Qingshan's eyes. Just when he was about to blaze with fury, it suddenly cooled down. Just what kind of eyes were those? When he looked at him, he did not seem like he was looking at a living creature. He became covered in cold sweat for some reason. Who knew how many qi practitioners at the sixth layer and above Li Qingshan had killed? Underground, he had even broken through his limits and gone on a killing spree. Looking at these people now, they were like pigs and dogs. If they were in the wilderness, he would not even need to say piss off. He would just kill them all. There was no need for him to purposefully display his murderousness. This thought would arise spontaneously, enough to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. Qian Rongji was the most skilled at reading people's expressions. She shivered slightly. This guy is becoming more and more terrifying. I need to be more careful in the future. Just what has he gone through in the past few months? Chapter 260. With his instincts from many years of plundering, the ugly man could sense that this young man would not be easy to deal with. Seeing how his seniors and juniors were still yelling at each other without any sense of propriety, even rubbing their hands and wanting to fight, he called out, "All of you, shut up." He asked cautiously, "May I ask what your name is?" "Let's go," Li Qingshan said to Qian Rongji. He directly strode off as if he did not exist. The ugly man's expression changed. Just when Li Qingshan was about to collide with him, he dodged to the side. He watched as he left with Qian Rongji and gulped silently. "Big brother, don't provoke him. This person is very dangerous." The ugly man looked at Li Qingshan's back. If this young man were the Black Wolf commander, he would not even consider contending with him. This woman would truly be difficult to deal with now that she had gained his assistance. In the main building, Fong Yinsheng pushed aside the curtains, tidied his desk, and sprinkled some water on it. He was prepared to deal with official business. He was still filled with passion for this job. Hearing the footsteps, he raised his head and said, "Oh, Rongji, you've come. Who's this?" This was the second time Li Qingshan had seen Fong Yinsheng. Back then in the quiet Spring Valley, if Fong Yinsheng had not interfered, it definitely would have turned into a battle to the death. Li Qingshan had a rather good impression of him. Qian Rongji introduced the two of them. Li Qingshan clasped his hands. Subordinate Li Qingshan greets the commander. "So you're Li Qingshan." Fong Yinsheng looked at the tall young man before him and studied him, as if he refused to believe that he was the tiger butcher who had killed countless people. He could not help but ask the question in his mind, "Where have you been during this period of time?" As a result, Li Qingshan told him the story he had prepared for a very long time. It was 70% true and 30% false. He admitted that Zhuozhibua had persecuted him and forced him to go underground. As he fled, he alarmed a powerful demon underground, which wiped out Zhuozhibua and the others. Only he managed to escape. This story, apart from the fact that Li Qingshan was the monster, there was not a single lie. Qian Rongji, who was at the side, helped him out at the right time. With her scheming methods, she had gotten along very well with Fang Yinsheng over the past few months. She also knew his temperament very well, so she cleverly manipulated his thoughts. Sure enough, Fang Yinsheng was filled with righteous indignation. How could there be such a person who colluded with a sinner, a commander who wholeheartedly wanted to deal with his subordinates? His death was truly not to be regretted. What about the former Black Wolf commander, Lao Shishan? Li Qingshan said, "I parted ways with the deputy commander there. I'm afraid the deputy commander didn't believe me and went underground as well." "Then why did you only return now?" Qian Rongji said, "That's something everyone knows about. Because of a child, Gardley has offended the sect, but he's not a disciple. Because of this matter, the sect's vice-sect master and the 4 grannies all came to Jiaping City. If I hadn't informed him to escape in time, he would have already been killed." Fang Yinsheng slammed the table. "They're completely out of control." Li Qingshan said, "I know the sect is powerful. I've returned this time because I want to enter secluded cultivation on the mountain for a while. The mayor of Zhouji has been kind enough to agree to recommend me to the 100 schools of thought. As long as I go to the 100 schools of thought, the sect should have some qualms." Fang Yinsheng patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. "Don't worry. As long as you're in the Hawkwolf Guard, no one will be able to touch you. Once you go to the 100 schools of thought, it's even more impossible for these sects to act as they please. Our Hawkwolf Guard won't allow anyone to trample over us." He was so sincere that even Li Qingshan felt rather embarrassed about lying to him. In the end, he took out the zombie Taoist corpse and handed in the mission, exchanging it for over 10,000 points of contribution. These points of contribution could be exchanged for qi, gathering pills, or spiritual stones. They were no longer in Li Qingshan's eyes. However, entering secluded cultivation in the dwelling on the mountain also required contribution. And it was not cheap. It required 50 points of contribution every day. Qian Rongji brought Li Qingshan to where he cultivated. It was also a spacious cave carved out of the mountain. Li Qingshan could sense that the spiritual qi in there was indeed slightly denser than outside. There were no tables, chairs, or beds in there. There was only a huge formation engraved on the ground. Qian Rongji said, "This is a spirit gathering formation, but you'll have to pay for it with spiritual stones if you want to activate it." Li Qingshan looked at the formation. Sure enough, there were many grooves on it. He nodded slightly and thought, what a good plan. Qian Rongji then pressed her hand against a disc on the wall. She channeled true qi into it and turned it gently. A huge boulder rolled over with a rumble. Once this stone door is sealed, it can only be opened from the inside. It's possible to open it from the outside as well, but you'll need to break through it forcefully. I think even the sect master wouldn't be bold enough to do something like that. Li Qingshan nodded. The entire Hawkwolf Guard would never allow something like that to happen. He took out a pill from his 100 treasures pouch and passed it to Qian Rongji. "If anything happens outside while I'm in secluded cultivation, I'll have to trouble you to deal with it. If there's any danger, I'll have to trouble you to warn me." Although his lies had fooled Fang Yinsheng, This was related to the deaths of 2 commanders and a group of Hawkwolf guards. Fang and Shang could not act on his own. He had to report this to his superiors. According to Qian Rongji's analysis, there should not be any major problems. This was just a precaution. A sea of qi pill. Qian Rongji's eyes lit up. The sea of qi pill was a crucial pill for breaking through from the 5th layer to the 6th. It could assist qi practitioners in condensing their sea of qi, so it was quite valuable. However, Li Qingshan had found almost 100 of them from over 1,000 treasures pouches. Taking one out was nothing. I've already found one. With this one, my chances will increase by another 30%. Qian Rongji accepted the pill. She did not say any words of gratitude. This was their relationship. They had nothing to do with each other, and they did not owe each other anything. It was a simple and clear way of using each other. There was absolutely no false feelings involved. There was not even a single word of nonsense. At this moment, there was a thump, and the huge rock sealed the door. The cave was pitch black. Qian Rongji also felt extremely relaxed. In this completely sealed space, her expression and bearing underwent a wondrous change. The warm and intimate feeling vanished, and the cold, slippery feeling filled Li Qingshan's heart once again. She was like a snake that was about to bite someone. Her eyes shone with a faint, cold light. She pursed her lips and smiled. With that, I can use the medicinal catalysts I left behind. The ugly man and his companions were all medicinal catalysts she had prepared for breaking through to the 6th layer. They would provide her with tremendous amounts of true qi at crucial times. Li Qingshan frowned. He turned the mechanism, and as the stone door slowly opened, the light landed on her face once more. Like magic, her expression changed slightly wherever the light shone. Once the light completely enveloped her, she recovered her image of a warm, gentle elder sister. Li Qingshan felt like she was more like a demon from the legends than him. The light cast a long shadow into the cave. Li Qingshan looked at the owner of the shadow. Jiao Fei. Jiao Fei hesitated. I heard you've returned. His cultivation had already reached the 4th layer. Although he did not progress as quickly as Li Qingshan and Qian Rongji after they had joined the Hawkwolf Guard, he did not waste his time. Chapter 261. At the foot of the mountain, in a breakfast shop, there were a few dishes, 3 bowls of porridge, and a few steamers of steamed buns. Jiao Fei wanted to find a restaurant, but Li Qingshan said, "Drinking wine in the morning is not the right time." Thereupon he came to this restaurant. As soon as the 3 Hawkwolf guards sat down, no one dared to approach them. Those who were eating dispersed in a hurry. Jiao Fei tossed out a dozen taels of silver, and only then did the owner's bitter expression ease. Little, and was eating his bun, with his head down. Jiao Fei mumbled, "How old is this child?" Li Qingshan smiled and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Qian Rongji picked up another bun and gave it to Little, and she smiled and said, "Do you need something from me? We're all acquaintances, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Feel free to tell us." Jiao Fei lowered his voice and said, "Do you know that the disciples of the 3 mountains have all died underground?" Qian Rongji said, "Everyone in the Clear River Prefecture knows about this." However, everyone's attention was focused on the disciple of the Sword Collection Palace killing a demon general, so this matter did not receive much attention. The rise and fall of 3 small sects was nothing compared to the turmoil of the entire world. Jiao Fei sighed heavily. "You know that I'm also a disciple of the Green Vine Mountain," Li Qingshan said. "Then I must congratulate you for escaping a calamity. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. Who can say for sure?" Jiao Fei's eyes became lost. In the past, He had only joined the Hawkwolf Guard because he had been ostracized. Originally, he wanted to cultivate diligently and find an opportunity to redeem himself, but now all the people who had ostracized him were dead. With his hatred gone, Jiao Fei took out a letter personally written by the Green Vine Elder, but he wanted him to return to the Green Vine Mountain. Li Qingshan understood what he meant by fortune and misfortune come hand in hand. The disciples of the Green Vine Mountain had all died, so they obviously had to gather the disciples who had been wandering outside. There would not be a lot of disciples like that, but they would go from being on the fringe of the sect to a core figure all of a sudden. Most of the disciples of the Green Vine Mountain were dead, but the basic resources were still there, and the entire sect's resources would be poured into these few core figures. The benefits were extraordinary. At the very least, it was much better than staying in the Hawkwolf Guard. However, what kind of place was the Hawkwolf Guard? How could they just come and go as they pleased? They had to ask the vice commander, Qian Rongji. True enough, Qian Rongji said, it won't be that easy to resign from the Hawkwolf Guard. Jiao Fei also knew that he couldn't just make empty promises. He had already prepared a bribe. He glanced at Li Qingshan, hesitating whether he should take it out in front of him. I still need to make a trip to the county government. I'll be going first. Li Qingshan immediately stood up. He picked up Little and walked out the door. At the back of the yamen, Zhou Wenbin was pacing in the garden when the steward came to report, Sir, Li Qingshan is outside asking for an audience. Zhou Wenbin said, quickly invite him in. When Li Qingshan strode in, he was slightly startled. In just a few months, Li Qingshan seemed to have changed. He had gone from the 3rd layer to the 4th layer, but just describing his cultivation as advancing did not seem to be enough to describe this change. He seemed to possess a frightening bearing. Greetings, Sir Li Qingshan. Zhou Wenbin returned the greeting in a hurry. He no longer dared to refer to himself as a senior. Li Qingshan stated his intentions, and Zhou Wenbin agreed immediately. He promised that there would be no problems at all. Li Qingshan eased up. After reminiscing about old times, he turned down Zhou Wenbin's invitation to stay and took his leave. After he left, Zhou Wenbin let out a gentle sigh. He really is a fish in a pond. Li Qingshan returned to the mountain. He did not see Qian Rongji or Jiao Fei again. He directly entered his residence for seclusion, turned the stone disc, and closed the stone door. Heaving a sigh of relief, Li Qingshan took out a dozen or so spirit stones and placed them in the grooves of the spirit-gathering formation. The lines carved on the stones immediately lit up. Spiritual qi began to continuously gather in the formation. The most concentrated place was the center of the formation. Li Qingshan reminded Xiao and a little, telling her not to forget to feed millipede often. He then sat cross-legged in the middle of the formation and began to refine his qi, urging the vital qi in his body to circulate. Since he had returned to the human world, qi refining cultivation was especially important. There were probably many foundation-building cultivators in the 100 schools of thought. He could not always transform into his monster form to kill his enemies. Even if he did not leave behind any evidence, it would still arouse suspicion after a long time. Moreover, the higher his cultivation, the less trouble he would have to face. During this seclusion, Li Qingshan focused most of his attention on qi refining. However, this did not mean Li Qingshan was lax with his demon cultivation. However, demon cultivation was nowhere near as complicated as qi refining. It only required large quantities of resources, and what Li Qingshan lacked the least right now were pills. The various pills provided to Li Qingshan from over 1,100 treasures pouches could be described as tremendous. They could last him for a few months, at the very least. He took out a handful of qi gathering pills first. There were several hundred of them, at the very least, before shoving them all into his mouth. As soon as they reached his stomach, they were surrounded by demon chi that was as flexible as flowing water. The demon core of the spirit turtle in the center bobbed up and down, slowly converting the pills into demon chi. As his demon body rapidly strengthened, refining several hundred chi-gathering pills at the same time no longer posed too great of a burden on him. This process was like a person slowly digesting food after eating. It did not affect his other activities. Li Qingshan took out a jade slip and carefully read through the mental cultivation method for the 5th layer of the Gui water method of condensing qi. Afterwards, his mind began to sinking into a boundless ocean. That was Li Qingshan's sea of consciousness. Immediately, he entered a meditative state. The Gui water method of condensing qi began to operate. The spiritual qi gathered by the spirit gathering formation flowed into Li Qingshan's body, constantly converted into true qi and rammed against the yin heel meridian. A visible mist of light rose up from Li Qingshan's body. At a closer glance, the mist of light did not disperse into the surroundings. Instead, it gathered in his body. This was spiritual qi that had condensed to a certain degree, appearing just now. Li Qingshan could not help but admire the intelligence of human cultivators. Although this tiny spirit gathering formation was not as effective as Milliped's bed of spiritual stones, it was not too different. Cultivating qi was not suitable for directly absorbing spiritual power from spirit stones, but using spirit stones to power the formation and gathering the spiritual qi of heaven and earth seemed to have gone through some kind of processing and become suitable for absorption. The extremely pure Gui water, true qi rolled like the tide, continuously surging towards the Zhubin meridian in the calf. That was the beginning of the yin linking meridian. The Zhubin meridian opened, and the true qi entered the Fuxia meridian. The Fuxia meridian opened and broke through the Chongmen meridian and then reached the Taiheng meridian on the waist. At this point, the true qi was already exhausted, but the spiritual qi surged in, almost pushing the true qi forward. The Daheng, Fuai, Qimen, Tiantu, and other major meridian points were opened one by one, finally reaching the Lianxuan meridian in the throat. Li Qingshan's body shook, and his true qi flowed freely. The yin linking meridian was opened. He had finally reached the 5th layer of qi training. The entire process was unexpectedly smooth. At this point, the yang heel meridian, yin heel meridian, yang linking meridian, and yin linking meridian, all 4 of Li Qingshan's yin and yang meridian were opened and connected. His true qi surged endlessly, and his body seemed to become lighter. It was extremely similar to the feeling of flying into the sky and becoming an immortal that mortals spoke of. However, Li Qingshan knew that this was just a feeling. If he wanted to truly fly, it would not be that simple. However, this goal was not that far away. When Li Qingshan opened his eyes, 3 days had already passed. The hundreds of qi gathering pills in his stomach had been completely digested. The light of the spirit stones on the spirit gathering formation had dimmed, and the spiritual qi was almost completely gone. Little and sat facing the wall, seemingly in a meditative state. She had devoured a large amount of flesh and blood underground. Qi practitioners were incomparable to ordinary people. The essence contained in their flesh and blood was enough to surpass that of 10 or even 100 people. She also wanted to use this opportunity to refine this power. Li Qingshan did not disturb her. He quietly looked inside his body and felt the surging true qi. He tried to urge the true qi to gather in his dantian. The true qi converged into a sea of qi, but as long as he was distracted for a moment, the true qi would return to his meridians. Yes, Li Qingshan wanted to take advantage of this secluded cultivation to break through to the 6th layer of qi training and open the sea of qi in his dantian. At that time, the many spirit tools in his 1,000 or so hundred treasures pouches could be put to use, and he would be able to truly control them. Moreover, his body's speed and strength would also increase greatly. He would not need to transform into his demon form to be able to battle any qi practitioner. However, according to the water condensation method, the first 5 layers of qi training were considered easy. From the 6th layer onwards, it would become increasingly difficult. The opening of the conception and governing vessels and girdle vessels was not as simple as the 4 yin and yang meridians. Chapter 262. As for the water arrow spell and water prison spell, they were not among Li Qingshan's choices. He did not lack offensive methods. Finally, his gaze fell on the 2 paintings. Every spell had such a simple painting. In one painting, a cultivator was stepping on a thin layer of white clouds. In the other painting, the cultivator was surrounded by rolling mist, seemingly moving forward at a fast speed. What he wanted to learn now were the riding the clouds spell and riding the mist spell. These 2 spells were both connected and mutually exclusive. The riding the clouds spell focused on flying up and down, but the speed of advancing was not as fast as a good horse. The riding the mist spell focused on moving, but it could only fly close to the ground. When the 2 were combined, it was riding the clouds and riding the mist, allowing the cultivator to soar freely between heaven and earth. There was no special reason. Flying was everyone's dream, and Li Qingshan was no exception. The value of flying in the process of battle did not need to be said. When the day came out, he directly rode the clouds and flew into the sky. At the same time, he used the glaze invisibility mirror to hide his figure. Even if a Foundation establishment cultivator wanted to find him in the vast sky, it would not be that easy. Learning spells was also beneficial for deepening the control of Gui water, true qi, and stabilizing his cultivation. If he wanted to do it, he would do it. He immediately began to study. In the secret room, Li Qingshan's hands formed a seal, and he calmed his mind. A trace of white mist began to gather in his hands. In another place of seclusion, Qian Rongji also began her own training. Jiao Fei watched the stone door slowly close with a complicated expression. Qian Rongji smiled and waved at him. "I wish you a pleasant journey." In the deepest part of the stone cave, there were several black bags piled up. Inside were many round things that seemed to be trembling slightly. Bright red liquid slowly seeped out. They were supposed to be outside on a mission. That could be said to be a gentle and amiable smile, but it made Jiao Fei feel a chill in his heart. Qian Rongji did not ask him for a bribe. She only asked him for a small favor. He had been outside for many years and had never been soft-hearted when it came to killing people. However, compared to this woman's method of killing, it was as simple and cute as a child. Takidera those people would disappear from the world forever, and no one would even suspect her. The stone door slammed shut, and Jiao Fei turned around and left eagerly as if he was hiding from something extremely terrifying. With Qian Rongji's assistance, his position as a Black Wolf guard had been suspended. He could return to the Green Vine Mountain to cultivate. The verdant mountain that he had once resented suddenly seemed to haunt him. It was like a verdant pearl. At the very least, compared to the Hawkwolf Mountain, compared to being with the 2 of them day in and day out, the Green Vine Mountain was much safer. Once he knew her secret, would she deal with him? He would have trouble eating and drinking. Fortunately, he could finally go back now. After several days of nonstop travel, Jiao Fei returned to the Green Vine Mountain once again. Compared to the prosperity of the past, it seemed especially cold and lonely now. Arriving in the main hall, the Green Vine elder personally received him and gave him a few words of encouragement. He was amiable, but he had been through far too much already. His heart could not be roused up so easily with just a few words. All he did was pretend to be grateful. Apart from him, there were a few men and women that he was not particularly familiar with. Some of them seemed familiar, while others he did not recognize at all. However, their cultivations were not particularly high. As a fourth-layer Qi practitioner, he actually ranked third among them. They had all been promoted to intersect disciples, and they were given their own duties. Every single one of them was a cushy job that they could not obtain no matter how hard they tried in the past, but now they could only manage the sect with barely any effort. The resources and treatment they received were basically on par with the first senior brother's level in the past. Jiao Fei was assigned to be in charge of teaching the basic cultivation methods of the new disciples. This job did not stand out, but it was the most prestigious. The Green Vine elder gave him a few more words of advice before returning to the cultivation area. The few remaining disciples of the Green Vine Mountain greeted one another. One of them, a man with an unkempt beard, went up and said, "I'm Yu Shuquang. Greetings, Senior Brother Jiao." Looking around to make sure no one was around, he suppressed his voice and said, "Senior Brother Jiao, I heard you've just returned from the Hawkwolf Guard of Jiaping." Jiao Fei frowned slightly. The position of a hawk and a hound of the empire was not well received in the sect. That was basically touching on his sore spot, but he still answered with a yep. Yu Shuquang said, "Then are you familiar with Li Qingshan?" Jiao Fei immediately dared not tarry. "You know him?" Yu Shuquang said. "Who doesn't know the great name of the Tiger Butcher?" Seeing how Jiao Fei did not believe him, he said, "You can say we've met once." There was nothing to hide about this, so Jiao Fei told him about Li Qingshan's return. Yu Shuquang seemed rough on the outside, but he was actually quite meticulous on the inside. His expression did not change, and he naturally changed the topic, talking about the daughter he took pride in. However, he let out a sigh of relief inside. In the past, Lu Fengrui had brought the proud Sword Manor under the jurisdiction of the Green Vine Mountain. As the lord of the manor, he could be regarded as half a member of the Green Vine Mountain. However, he had only managed to come to the Green Vine Mountain because of Yu Zijian. The Green Vine elder knew that Yu Zijian's future was bright, so he became interested in befriending her. As a result, Yu Shuquang had gone from half a member of the Green Vine Mountain to a member of the entire Green Vine Mountain, and an inner sect disciple at that. Originally, no sect would be willing to accept an adult like him. No matter how poor the Green Vine Mountain was, the Green Vine elder would rather start from a child. How could an experienced person of the Jianghu, like Yu Shuquang, have any loyalty to a sect, apart from his own gratitude? The reason why he asked about Li Qingshan was mostly because of Yu Zijian. Yu Zijian returned from the Green Vine Mountain safe and sound. She told her father everything that had happened. Although Yu Shuquang found it a pity that Yu Zijian did not accept the Sword Collection Palace's invitation, he still felt like he had been quite lucky this year. He held a great celebration in the manor, but Yu Zijian always seemed to be in thought. She became much quieter, no longer as lively as before. He could not help but sigh over how his daughter had grown up. Before he came to the Green Vine Mountain, Yu Zijian had asked him to keep an eye out for someone extremely seriously. That person was obviously Niu Juxia, who had vanished after the herb gathering ceremony of the Three Mountains. Yu Shuquang obviously knew what kind of person Niu Juxia was. His heart skipped a beat. Did his daughter already have someone in her heart? However, she did not seem like a young girl who had fallen in love, so he asked a few more questions. Under those circumstances, he's probably already... What are you going to do? He was afraid that she would say something about being a widow and dying for love. Yu Zijian lowered her head and remained silent for quite a while. Only then did she say, I will definitely avenge him. Her determination basically made him doubt whether the person before him was still his daughter. He could not help but sigh inside. Our daughter is not as weak as you after all. Now that he learnt that Li Qingshan had returned safely, he became troubled over how he should contact her. Jiao Fei suddenly said, Li Qingshan will be going to the 100 schools of thought soon. Perhaps he might become your daughter's classmate. Yu Shuquang was surprised. He smiled bitterly inside, as it seemed there was no need for him to worry about this anymore. However, was there really some sort of fate between them? Hopefully, it wasn't an ill-fated fate. Li Qingshan has returned. Hua Sengzan tossed a document before Wang Puxi. It was Fang Yinshang's report. Not only did it state Li Qingshan's explanation for Zhuo Zhibu's case, but it also contained Fang Yinshang's praise for him, strongly recommending Li Qingshan to join the school of legalism. This was not all thanks to Qian Rongji. As soon as Li Qingshan joined the Hawkwolf Guard, he had cleared up several dozen old cases. He had even borrowed the power of the disciples of Moism to bring back the corpse of the zombie Taoist, who ranked first on the blacklist. He could be described as smart and capable. Although his bearing was slightly cruel, it matched the spirit of the school of legalism's strict laws. Wang Puxi saw this, but he became slightly angered. He's actually bold enough to return. Does he really think we're idiots who can't see through his tricks? Little Fang is still too inexperienced. He doesn't know how treacherous people can be. Hua Sengzan said, Old Wang, don't be too prejudiced by first impressions. Yinshang saw through him too. Li Qingshan can be regarded as a capable person when it comes to handling matters. He cultivates extremely quickly too. He can be regarded as a rare talent. He can strengthen the might of our school of legalism. Wang Puxi glanced at Hua Sengzan in surprise. Why do you suddenly think so highly of him? Forget it. Let's do this then. I can't be bothered to worry about this kid. Purging the remnants of the White Lotus sect is the main priority. With that, he left in a hurry. Hua Sengzan gazed out the window. The winter snow had begun to melt. The awakening of insects was brewing. He did not tell Wang Puxi the true reason. Back then on the Green Vine Mountain, before Gu Yenying left, she had said casually, if you see him again in the future, you might as well take care of him a little. You can say that I've given him some guidance after all. How could he not pay attention to what she had said? It was inconvenient for him to tell Wang Puxi about this, or he would have to teach him a lesson again. He was rather interested in this young man who was bold enough to stare at her unblinkingly, but it was impossible for him to feel jealousy. Who knew how many people had received guidance from her over all these years? On the way back to the Clear River Prefecture from the Green Vine Mountain, Hua Qinglu said something he believed to be the most mature thing he had said in all these years. Brother, you better give up. I can't imagine how she'll fall in love with a man. All Hua Sengzan could do was smile bitterly and bitterly. How could he imagine it either? He had known her for all these years, and she was as graceful as the wind. Her emotions were not pretentious at all. Even now, he still could not figure out what she was thinking. When she was gentle, it was like a spring breeze, but when she was cold, it was like a blade. She was as unpredictable as the wind. Since it was the wind, why would it remain in a person's arms? Little Anne opened her eyes. A third skull prayer bead condensed in her hand. Afterwards, she heard Li Qingshan's eager voice. Look, Little, and I can fly now. Little Anne looked back and burst out laughing. All she saw was Li Qingshan sitting with his legs crossed. He formed a seal with his hands, and layers of white clouds appeared below him, lifting him up. However, he was only a foot above the ground, and he even tottered about. who knew how far away he was from the realm of flying. Li Qingshan was not embarrassed at all. He sniggered. This is the first step of a long journey. Just watch as I fly into the sky one day. Little N's gaze was gentle. Let's do it together. Of course. Li Qingshan opened the bug pouch, and Millipede crawled out. His body seemed to have grown a bit larger, and he waved his tentacles. Eat, eat. Glutton! Li Qingshan scolded jokingly. He took out some food and let Millipede eat. It was already February. There was still about a month before the opening of the 100 Schools of Thought. Li Qingshan wanted to break through to the 6th level of Qi refinement within this month. The 6th level of Qi refinement and the 5th level of Qi refinement were two completely different concepts, be it in terms of strength or status. As long as he could reach the 6th level of Qi refinement, he believed that even if he went to the 100 Schools of Thought, he would not have to worry about being buried. He did not go to the 100 Schools of Thought to seek refuge. He did not plan to follow the principle of keeping a low profile and playing it safe. No matter the environment, there was a natural law of survival of the fittest. Only the fittest could obtain more resources and have a better environment to cultivate in. This was the path he wanted to take. After waiting for a while, the true Qi in his yin and yang meridians had long since reached a full state. This was not a difficult thing for him, who could absorb the spiritual Qi of the world. In the process of cultivating spells, he had also become extremely skilled at controlling the Gui water true Qi. Was he ready? He did not know, but it was time to take a gamble. Li Qingshan's gaze became resolute. At the foot of the mountain, in the building. It was dark inside the building. After a few unforeseen events, the building's vitality was greatly damaged, and it was also suppressed from all sides. It was difficult to restore its former glory. The structure of the atrium had once connected the bustling building from top to bottom, but at this time it also seemed particularly quiet. Only the murals of the Jade Maiden flying in the sky still had a smile on their faces. Is that little bastard really on the mountain? In the underground palace downstairs, a middle-aged man with gray hair asked. The current head of the building said cautiously, "Headmaster, there is absolutely no mistake. Many people saw him. That Li Qingshan is in seclusion in the cave on the mountain. As soon as he comes out, immediately report to me. I don't believe that he won't go down the mountain." This middle-aged man was the vice headmaster of the school, Wei Zhongyuan. He did not wear the luxurious purple clothes, but an old gray one. It was obvious that he wanted to hide his tracks. When he mentioned Li Qingshan's name, he gnashed his teeth. Ever since Li Qingshan splattered the building with blood and killed the procuress, he had developed grievances with the school. Towards the end, even Wei Zhongyuan's son and the two grannies of the school had died mysteriously. Wei Zhongyuan did not believe that Li Qingshan had the strength to kill the two grannies, but he firmly believed that it had something to do with him. He had made up his mind when he hid below the mountain this time. As long as Li Qingshan appeared, he would capture him and torture him as much as he could to force a confession out of him. Only then would his hatred be appeased. As long as the Hawkwolf Guard did not have any direct evidence, there was nothing they could do to him. Of course, he did not have the courage to barge into the mountain and directly kill Li Qingshan right now. "Headmaster, please let it go. We have eyes all over the mountain. As soon as he emerges, the headmaster will know immediately." When Li Qingshan opened the girdle meridian, he finally realized that the last 4 meridians of the 8 extraordinary meridians were different from the first 4. What he needed to do right now was not just opening the acupoints. During this process, he needed to constantly balance the flow of true Qi in the 4 yin and yang meridians. The difficulty was not just increased by 4 times. It was basically multiplied by several levels. In the beginning, he tried to circulate all 4 meridians at the same time, but he soon realized that this was an impossible task for him right now. He could only be patient and first activate the vital energy in the yin and yang heel meridians, even if he had the foundation of congealing spells. Even if he had the foundation to condense techniques, he would often lose sight of the other. Fortunately, what Li Qingshan had bought was the general version of the Gui water method of condensing qi, the experiences of his seniors. It was extremely detailed. However, whenever Li Qingshan tried to imitate it, he would never succeed. At a time like this, Li Qingshan obviously had to ask little and for guidance. Just how should he balance his true qi? Can't you just focus a little? Little and was surprised. Focus a little. How? Little and widened her eyes. For the first time, she was unable to help Li Qingshan, as she had no idea what the difficulty was. I know my comprehension is average. You don't have to deal such a heavy blow to me. Li Qingshan patted Xiao and shoulder and said to the upright millipede, right? Millipede, this sort of thing. It's not that easy for you and me to master. Millipede opened his mouth and spat out a gust of demonic qi. Although it was weak, it was divided into a dozen or so thin streams that intersected and overlapped with each other, forming an extremely rhythmic and moving picture. Although he had lost his demon core, greatly damaging his cultivation, he was still a demon general in the past. He had reached a realm of cultivation that Li Qingshan had never experienced before. Although he was rather slow-witted when it came to the ways of the world, how could something as trivial as controlling demon qi trouble him? Li Qingshan wanted to find a balance from him, but he had found the wrong demon. Little and spread his hands and said, "It's very simple, right?" Li Qingshan didn't say a word and went back to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. Only then did Li Qingshan manage to split his attention and circulate the true qi in his yin and yang heel meridians as he wished. After another day, he achieved the balance required to condense the sea of qi in his yin and yang heel meridians. However, unifying the 4 meridians was still extremely difficult. He only focused on trying again and again. He did not eat or drink, nor did he sleep or rest. In the eyes of others, he seemed to be possessed. Little and could not help but worry. However, Li Qingshan knew that he was not in a hurry, nor was he dejected. He only constantly searched for a feeling. Since he was not a genius, he would make up for it with hard work. If he failed 100 times, he would try 1,000 times. If he failed 1,000 times, he would try 10,000 times. No matter how patient a person was, they would become impatient and dejected after failing 10,000 times. However, Li Qingshan did not. The spirit turtle did not just suppress demon qi. It suppressed his mind as well. For the 91,512th time, for streams of true qi rose at the same time. One wavered while the other wavered, but they maintained a wondrous balance the entire time. At the same time, the true qi in his girdle meridian circulated rapidly, binding the 4 streams of true qi like a belt and sending them into his dantian. Just as the sea of qi was about to form, it dispersed again. He had failed at the last moment. However, Li Qingshan smiled. It was a great improvement to reach this step, but truly splitting open the sea of qi would take several months at the very least. Even a year would not be slow. There were only a few days left until the entrance examination of the 100 schools of thought. Apart from making up for it with hard work, money could as well. He took out close to 100 C of qi pills and lined them up. Then he consumed one. The effect of the sea of qi pill was to merge the 4 streams of true qi together. However, the success rate was not 100%. As expected, the first sea of qi pill failed. He failed, then consumed it. The cycle repeated. Even after consuming more than 20 C of qi pills, he still had not succeeded. Li Qingshan's expression did not change in the slightest. If ordinary qi warriors saw him consume C of qi pills in this manner, they would most likely curse him for wasting them. They would usually wait until they had a certain degree of confidence before taking out their precious C of qi pills in pursuit of success. However, Li Qingshan was not afraid of wasting them. He could afford to. The most fundamental purpose of all medicinal pills was to save him cultivation time. As long as he became stronger, he would naturally be able to obtain more and better medicinal pills. Time waited for no man. After consuming the 37th C of qi pill, the 4 streams of true qi simultaneously flowed into his dantian under the restraint of his girdle meridian. Under the effect of the C of qi pill, they fused together. The medicinal efficacy of the previous 36 C of qi pills still remained, almost forcibly gluing the true qi together. However, this time, a rumbling sound seemed to come from his lower abdomen. The 4 streams of true qi, yin and yang, fused into one. The true qi in his dantian fluctuated, forming a vast ocean. It no longer flowed out, but instead became the source and destination of all the true qi in his body. He had broken through the 6th layer, and the sea of qi had been condensed. Li Qingshan finally smiled in relief, but he immediately withered up. The exhaustion and lethargy that he had forcefully suppressed with the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression all surged up. He almost could not help but fall asleep. Over the past half a month, he had forcefully used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to maintain his mental state at peak condition, just so that he would not waste any bit of experience he gained from each attempt. This kind of barbaric method was extremely taxing on his spirit, and there was even the danger of that string snapping. But in the end, he persevered and reached the other side. Little and went up and rubbed his forehead gently. He said gently, "Sleep for a while. Don't forget to wake." Little N's words seemed to possess a wondrous power. Before Li Qingshan had even finished speaking, he collapsed on the ground loudly, falling into a deep slumber. He slept extremely heavily this time. He was in a dreamlike state the entire time. He felt like he was bobbing up and down in the ocean, drifting with the undercurrents and waves. He would sink into the depths of the ocean at times and rise to the surface at other times. Before little N could call him, he woke up. His head still hurt, slightly. He shook his head and asked, "How long did I sleep for?" "Roughly 14 hours. It's time to set off." Li Qingshan suddenly stood up and grinned. "Yeah." Li Qingshan opened the bug pouch and said to Millipede, "Just bear with it for a little longer. Don't worry, it won't be for too long." Millipede dove into the bug pouch and discovered the various foods Little N had prepared for him. He immediately began to gorge himself, but he did not feel like he had been wronged at all. He turned the stone disc, and the stone door slowly opened. A gust of fresh air surged in. Spring was already in the air. His seclusion was at the back of the mountain. It was secluded in the first place, so he did not inform anyone. He directly used the cloud-treading mist technique. Rolling clouds gathered beneath his feet. After opening up his sea of energy, he discovered that it was unprecedentedly easy to use spells, and the effects were many times stronger. The clouds carried Li Qingshan and Little and into the sky. However, they had only flown a few meters before disappearing in a flash of clear light. "Master, Li Qingshan has come out of seclusion," the owner of the building hurriedly reported. "Where is he now?" Wei Zhongyuan had long since grown impatient. He was delighted to hear this. "No, he's gone." The owner stammered. A message had come from the mountain. The seclusion cave abode was wide open, but there was no one inside. No one knew where Li Qingshan had gone. That little bastard. Wei Zhongyuan waved his hand, and the owner was sent flying. He crashed heavily into the wall and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, facing the furious Wei Zhongyuan, he did not dare to resist, nor did he dare to say anything. Wei Zhongyuan roared angrily, "No matter where you escape to, I will find you and tear you to pieces." The clouds had already flown to the highest point they could reach. The sky was a dazzling blue. Li Qingshan extended his hand towards the sky, as if he wanted to touch the illusion, the promise above the 9 heavens. Although his hand was only touching the void, the corner of his lips curled into a smile. Under the light of the spring sun, it was so bright that one could not look at it directly. Little and looked straight at him, as if he was looking at an illusion. He silently recited his promise. It was not to the long-forgotten hometown in the south, but to accompany him until beyond the 9 heavens. After a long while, Li Qingshan lowered his head and looked down at the mountains. The surging clear river turned into a shining arc of light. Hawkwolf Mountain was like a small mound. Wei Zhongyuan's angry roar was probably not even comparable to the buzzing of a mosquito, so Li Qingshan did not pay any attention to it. He took out the mental map of the Green Province, adjusted the direction, and pointed southeast. "Let's go to the 100 schools of thought." It was unlikely for him to run into people of the same sect in such a large city, so there was no harm in being careful. Arriving on the ground, he discovered the grandeur of the city even more. There were still no city walls. If war really did break out one day, the outcome of the war would definitely be decided in the sky. The city walls on the ground were just a small, earthen slope. There was even less of a need to guard against bandits and bandits. This was the headquarters of the entire Hawkwolf Guard of the Clear River Prefecture. There were 2 commanders stationed here, so anyone who made trouble here would be captured and skinned immediately. Li Qingshan's first destination was the headquarters of the Hawkwolf Guard. Originally, every new member of the Hawkwolf Guard would have to come to the Clear River Prefecture to see the 2 copper commanders after a period of observation. It was basically a routine matter. Qian Rongji and Jiao Fei had already come to the Clear River Prefecture. Only Li Qingshan had not done so. Before he entered secluded cultivation, Fang and Shang had specially reminded him to report in as soon as he arrived in the Clear River Prefecture. He wanted to go to the 100 schools of thought to cultivate, so he had to do this. He could not help but think about the situation from over a year ago. The handsome Commander Hua and the stern old Wang. He wondered what their expressions would be when they saw him again. And it was already so late. The 2 of them probably were not at work. Li Qingshan thought. Suddenly, he sensed something, and a pulse seemed to sweep past him. Li Qingshan immediately raised his guard, but he did not see anyone approach him. He could not help but feel rather confused. Little and said, "This is a formation." "How did you know?" "It's written in the Book of All." Li Qingshan was surprised. An array formation that enveloped such a large city was no different from an invisible wall, guarding against the Qi practitioners that could truly pose a threat to them. However, he guessed that the formation was probably much more effective as a deterrent than it actually was. Li Qingshan traveled along the river. The towering ships on the wide river seemed like a city within a city. The docks were bustling with activity, and the lanterns were as bright as day, illuminating the willow trees that were budding on the banks of the river. It was hazy like a ball of mist. People flowed to and fro on the main road, weaving together like shuttles. It was both prosperous and joyous. Li Qingshan suddenly came to a realization. These mortals lived under the care of gods. Li Qingshan made his way through the roads with little and found his destination very soon. It was a scarlet building that stood several dozen stories tall. At the very top of the building stood a bronze hawk even larger than Jiaping City. It also had its eyes wide open and its wings spread. It was quite awe-inspiring. Li Qingshan could not help but wonder if this was the Rui Commandery, where Gu Yening resided. Wouldn't they have to use silver to make a huge bird like that? If it were South Hub City, they probably would have to make a golden hawk. However, at that level of cultivation, what was gold and silver supposed to do? Li Qingshan dispersed the invisibility technique and made his way up the stairs, entering the magnificent building. The hall was quiet. The only path leading to the top was a spiral staircase. The marble floor was shiny like a mirror. Only a woman dozed off behind a marble table. Li Qingshan purposefully made his footsteps louder, but he failed to rouse the woman either. In the end, he discovered she was just a regular person. The security was so lax that it was basically impossible to connect her to the Hawkwolf Guard. All he could do was walk over and knock on the table. The woman jerked awake. "Who are you looking for?" Li Qingshan said. "Black Wolf Guard of Jiaping City. Li Qingshan has come to see the two commanders. Commander Wang has already returned home." The woman saw Li Qingshan's waist tablet, so she dared not tarry. Li Qingshan asked, "Then what about Commander Hua?" The woman immediately said, "Commander Hua's gone drinking with prostitutes a long time ago." She covered her mouth in a hurry, knowing she had misspoken. Li Qingshan curled his lip. As it seemed, this Commander Hua did not seem to be very dignified here. The woman was clearly just a regular attendant. There were probably no qi practitioners who were willing to do this, which was why they chose a regular person with a rather pleasant appearance. "You can rest for the night upstairs. I'll see the two commanders tomorrow." Clearly, the purpose of this magnificent building was not just for work. It could also provide lodgings for the guards who came from other places. As Li Qingshan pondered, a voice rang out from above. "You've finally come." Qian Rongji walked down the spiral staircase slowly. She was not wearing the uniform of the Hawkwolf Guard. Instead, she had changed into a thin, purple spring dress. Her hair was combed into a bun, revealing her snow-white neck. Compared to her gentle and amiable demeanor in Jiaping City, she seemed much more elegant. At this moment, even Li Qingshan struggled to connect her to the Qian Rongji of the past. Her bearing had not just changed, but sublimated. Her cultivation level was already at the 6th layer of the aura refining realm, which probably played a crucial role. Li Qingshan frowned. "Why are you here?" Qian Rongji touched her hair. "I also want to come to the 100 schools of thought to cultivate. Perhaps we might even be classmates in the future, right, Little?" And she winked at Little, and before saying to Li Qingshan, "Congratulations on reaching the 6th layer." Even though he didn't show it on his face, he was astonished. When he first met Zhang Xian, he was only at the 1st layer of qi refining realm. In less than a year, he had already reached the 6th layer. Furthermore, his true strength was far from what he had shown. Even though the reason why she could cultivate so quickly was because of the brutal cultivation method, the vitality-devouring technique, it was also related to her many years of accumulation, which was why she had managed to split open her sea of qi in a single stroke. Li Qingshan said, "Likewise." Her elation was not a pretense. Any qi practitioner who had reached the 6th layer of the aura refining realm would feel happy about it. However, her exquisite getup did not seem to be that simple. "Rongji, what are you doing here? Didn't we agree to eat together?" A young man made his way down the stairs and arrived beside Qian Rongji. Li Qingshan's eyes twinkled. He had seen the man before. He was Wu Zhen, who had led the group to annihilate the truth-seeking society in the past. It was nothing strange at all for Qian Rongji to know him. Wu Zhen was familiar with Fang and Shang. Since Qian Rongji, whom he valued highly, had come to the Clear River Prefecture, He obviously had to ask this good friend of his to take care of her. When he saw how Wu Zhen looked at Qian Rongji, Li Qingshan felt enlightened. That was the gaze of a man looking at a woman. Although it was purposefully hidden, the desire was still naked. The prey had already taken the bait. Brother Wu, this is a colleague who joined the Hawkwolf Guard with me. He's called Li Qingshan. Qingshan, this is a good friend of our commander. He's called Wu Zhen. Qian Rongji introduced him gracefully, but she maintained a certain distance from Wu Zhen the entire time. She seemed closer to Li Qingshan. Chapter 265. Qian Rongji was no longer the same Qian Rongji who was in a hurry to change her fate and hook up with a superior when she first came to Jiaping City. Now that she had the capital to wait for the right price, she understood extremely well that men were all despicable wretches. It would be easier for her to achieve her objective if she prevented them from obtaining her. However, all of this was built on cultivation. Only with her cultivation at the 6th layer could Wu Zhen regard her with importance, preventing him from using forceful methods. Back in Jiaping City, even if she wanted to use this method to keep Zhui Jibwa dangling, it would have been impossible. Only strength could win respect. This was one of the most fundamental laws of the cultivation community. Li Qingshan saw all of this, but he did not expose it. Originally, he had some minor grievances with Wu Zhen, so he instead pitied him a little now. He bowed. "Greetings, Sir Wu." Wu Zhen saw how Li Qingshan was a 6th layer Qi practitioner, so he did not become overly arrogant. He returned the bow casually. "Not bad. You have some talent. You can consider changing your clothes. When you enter the 100 schools of thought in a few days, we'll all be family, so we should get closer. Let's go. I'll take you to see Commander Hua." "May I ask where Commander Hua is?" "Pavilion, obviously. Let's go together." Li Qingshan was mildly surprised. Qian Rongji became troubled too. She had been expelled as soon as she joined the sect. She had personally slaughtered Wei Zhongyuan's son, and all of her cultivation came from the secret art. "Rongji, I've told you before, that place isn't like what you imagine it to be. There are many interesting things there. Most of the best chefs in the entire Clear River Prefecture are there. You definitely won't be disappointed." Wu Zhen thought Qian Rongji was reluctant to go to a brothel, so he tried to persuade her gently. Qian Rongji tactfully mentioned Li Qingshan's grievances with the sect. Wu Zhen studied Li Qingshan. "I couldn't tell, but you sure know how to make trouble," Li Qingshan said. "The tree desires peace, but the wind will not cease. I'll stay here for the night and see Commander Hua tomorrow." "Wait." Wu Zhen took out the Crimson Wolf tablet and flicked it. With a flash of light, he said, "Big Brother Hua, there's someone from Jiaping called Li Qingshan. He wants to see you, but he seems to have some conflict with Big Sister Qiu." "Yes, okay." Then he looked up. "Wait a minute. He says he's coming." Net. This made Li Qingshan feel as if he had transmigrated back in time. He was in a daze for a moment. He was puzzled. What kind of person was Big Sister Qiu? Qian Rongji said in a low voice, "Schoolhead, Begonia, foundation building cultivator." Li Qingshan shuddered. The Hawkwolf Guard of the Clear River Prefecture actually had such a deep connection with the sect. Before his colleagues, Wu Zhen was not as arrogant as he was in the quiet Spring Valley. However, he could not help but show off a little. Li Qingshan and Qian Rongji shared the same thoughts, so they answered him reluctantly. They would look at each other from time to time, which made Wu Zhen rather unhappy. A while later, there was a long neigh outside. A fine horse with a silver mane stopped at the entrance. Its hooves actually did not touch the ground as it rode over on the wind. The horse was a head taller than regular horses. It was covered in fine scales. It was extremely handsome. a nimble figure dismounted from the horse. It was Hua Sengzan. Wu Zhen smiled. "Brother Hua, why don't you sell this silver dragon horse to me for 1,000 spiritual stones?" Hua Sengzan glanced at Wu Zhen. Buying a horse's leg is more like it. His face was flushed red, as if he had applied a layer of rouge on it. However, his eyes were still clear, and when he saw Li Qingshan, his eyes lit up. He hadn't expected that the person she had mentioned would appear in front of him so quickly. When he saw Li Qingshan's cultivation level, he was shocked again. He clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "6th layer of aura refining. Impressive, impressive." Li Qingshan was neither servile nor overbearing as he said, "This subordinate greets Commander Hua." Hua Sengzan waved his hand. "Now is not the time to work. Don't call me Commander." Wu Zhen said, "At my age, I should be in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm. What's so great about that?" Net, Wu Zhen had reached the 8th layer at such a young age. He could be regarded as a prodigy in the Clear River Prefecture that was teeming with talented people. The only person who admired him was Hua Sengzan. He could not help but feel rather disgruntled when he heard him praise Li Qingshan's cultivation, and he did it in front of Qian Rongji. Although Li Qingshan was only 17, his bearing was steady. No matter who saw him, they could not treat him as a regular teenager. Instead, he was a man who possessed his own charm. Hua Sengzan said, "How many years did it take you to reach the 6th layer?" "Around 10 years. What's that got to do with this?" Wu Zhen also came from an aristocratic clan. He had begun cultivating since he was young. After establishing a basic foundation, he was sent to the 100 schools of thought. Hua Sengzan raised a finger. "He only took a year." "Brother Hua, you're not joking, right?" Wu Zhen was immediately taken aback. He looked at Li Qingshan in surprise. He was unable to tell that this slightly rustic fellow possessed talent like that. Hua Sengzan said to Li Qingshan, "Am I right?" Li Qingshan said, "More or less." Wu Zhen's gaze towards Li Qingshan became much more cautious. Hua Sengzan placed his arm around Li Qingshan's shoulder naturally. "Let's go. Come upstairs with me." She immediately felt Li Qingshan's body tense up. He smiled, revealing his pure white teeth. Although he was slightly drunk, it only made him seem even more charming. Qian Rongji thought, even so-called peerlessly handsome men are only like this. She was afraid of casually attacking this man's principles, even though he was much more useful to her, as she had personally seen the sect master, Begonia. Li Qingshan had never thought he would immediately enter the nest of his greatest enemy as soon as he arrived in the Clear River Prefecture. There was a foundation establishment cultivator there. Wasn't that basically walking right into a trap? He could tell that this Hua Sengzan had a close relationship with the sect. Was he planning on working with the sect to screw him over? Hua Sengzan said, "There's no need to be so nervous. Relax. Women might be fierce like tigers, but they don't eat people at the end of the day. Right, Rongji?" Qian Rongji smiled, faintly. Yes, Wu Zhen liked her even more. She really is a woman I admire. When regular women saw Hua Sengzan, their eyes would widen. None of them could deal with him as easily as he did. Li Qingshan sank into his thoughts slightly. Hua Sengzan patted Li Qingshan's back. "Don't worry. This is my territory. I can guarantee your safety. If there's anything you want to say, just say it. I'm a mighty Hawkwolf guard. Hiding around isn't a solution." Qian Rongji said, "Yeah, Qingshan. Let's go take a look." "As you wish, Commander." Li Qingshan knew he could not turn her down. Dragging things out would only make her more suspicious, so he said firmly. Qian Rongji was vicious, but her insight was very sharp too. Since she was bold enough to go, it meant she had already made up her mind. He trusted her. They were in the same boat over this matter. In reality, she was a traitor, and her crimes were much greater than his. Even she was bold enough to go, so why would he be afraid? If he could resolve his worries, it would be a good thing. I said you're not allowed to call me commander, but that's more like it. Hua Sengzan crouched down again, and said to Little and beside Li Qingshan, you must be the Little and that the gate wants. Little and ignored him. She only held onto Li Qingshan's hand. Wu Zhen laughed aloud. So even you have times when you can't handle it. Hua Sengzan rubbed his nose. Looks like my charm still hasn't reached a woman your age. You better grow up soon. By then, you'll know just who's better between me and this Li guy. Wu Zhen laughed aloud, while Li Qingshan grinned. It was difficult for him to develop any ill will towards him. They walked out of the gate. Li Qingshan looked at the silver dragon horse that was moving its hooves and head. From a close distance, the horse was even more beautiful. Every muscle on its body was rhythmically beautiful. The spiritual aura floating around it was also extremely pure. Li Qingshan knew that this was a spiritual beast tamed by humans. If he went by the standards of demons, it would be a relatively powerful demonic beast. The saddle and the hooves on its hooves all flickered with light. They were worth a high-grade spiritual artifact, at the very least. Coupled with the daily cost of raising it, it was not something that regular qi practitioners could afford. Even if they could afford it, there was no need for it at all. However, the Hua clan's strength was precisely displayed in such unnecessary places. Do you want to ride it? Come, I'll carry you up. Seeing that Little and was also staring at the silver dragon horse, Hua Sengzan seemed to be unwilling to let his charm fail. He smiled and said, Little, and still shook her head. Li Qingshan carried her and placed her on the horse. He patted the horse's body lightly. Sit, there's still a long way to go. Be careful. Hua Chengzan reminded him in a hurry, but all he saw was the silver dragon horse standing there without moving as if it was stunned. That's strange. This bastard is normally very fiery. If I don't discuss it with him, he'll never let anyone ride him. Although horses were not as smart as humans, they still had a sense of danger that humans did not have. Wu Zhen also took out an item that looked like a tablet and summoned a fine horse. Although it was not as good as the white dragon horse, it was still an extraordinary spirit beast. He then invited Qian Rongji to get on the horse. Qian Rongji nodded to express her gratitude and sat on the horse gracefully. Hua Sengzan and Wu Zhen led the horse, and the group walked along the street towards the building. Along the way, Hua Sengzan and Wu Zhen discussed the pros and cons of all kinds of riding beasts. Horses were not the only ones among them. The price was extremely high, and the whole set of equipment would cost at least a few thousand spirit stones. Li Qingshan also did not have a word to say. He felt like a kid from the countryside, listening to a young master in the city talking about what kind of car to buy. Chapter 266. Magnificent palaces and brightly lit buildings. Even in this city full of tall buildings, a height of several hundred feet was outstanding. Strings of red lanterns hung down from the high eaves. The walls were painted with large murals of enchanting jade maidens flying in the sky. The most incredible thing was that these murals were actually dancing. Their eyebrows and eyes seduced the passers-by. Their bare hands plucked the pipa, and the strings actually sounded. It was magnificent, and magnificent like a fairyland. Wu Zhen said proudly, "What do you think of this place, Rongji?" Qian Rongji said, "It's very beautiful." She had been here before. Wu Zhen said, "What about you, Qingshan? In a small place like Jiaping, you won't be able to see such scenery in your entire life." Hua Sengzan thought Li Qingshan would be dumbfounded and speechless. Most people who came here for the first time would behave like that. However, although Li Qingshan's face was filled with admiration, he did not lose his composure. Hua Sengzan felt some praise in his heart. Li Qingshan said, "It reminds me of my hometown." Wu Zhen laughed. "That's the funniest joke I've heard today." Li Qingshan did not argue with him. This place did indeed make him think of his past life, that blurry world of light and shadow, neon lights that flickered constantly, and movies that passed off as real. There were probably not a lot of sights that could leave him dumbfounded. Wu Zhen took out the tablet again. Li Qingshan knew that it was a seal used to control spiritual beasts. Hua Sengzan also put the silver dragon horse away. As soon as he stepped into the building, a fragrant breeze filled his face. A group of young women in thin, spring clothes came up to receive him. Every single one of them was as beautiful as flowers, radiating with a vigorous presence of youth. They bumped into Hua Qingzan and chattered away, constantly calling him young master, young master, young master. Hua Sengzan did not reject them. He hugged them left and right, calling out their names with great familiarity. This made the girls excited again. How unruly! Hurry up and get back to your own business. A woman who looked like a manager came up and dispersed the group of unhappy girls. Li Qingshan originally thought that this place was very different from ordinary brothels, but after the group of young girls dispersed to greet the guests, they immediately changed their expressions. Courteous. Clearly, he had undergone strict training. A lady from a noble family had to be more dignified. As for the lady in charge, she bowed to Hua Sengzan gracefully. Her gaze wandered as she spoke shyly. "Playboy, you're back. Your friends must be waiting anxiously." Only then did they realize that Hua Sengzan had received special treatment, whereas Li Qingshan and Wu Zhen, the two men, had become complete foils. They looked at each other and felt that they were in the same boat. Li Qingshan looked up. This building also had an atrium structure, but its shape was not circular. It looked more like a swimming fish, and the scale of the building was more than 10 times larger than the buildings in Jiaping City. Countless covered bridges intersected in the sky, and people walked on them. It was like a city within a building. There were people coming and going in the building, men and women, young and old. A few Qi practitioners mingled among them, looking left and right like normal tourists, admiring the wonders of the building. Hua Sengzan teased the woman in charge a bit, then asked, "Where's Haitang?" "The sect master is cultivating in the back. Let her come here. I have a few friends I want to introduce her to." The woman glanced at Li Qingshan and Qian Rongji, then said reluctantly, "I'll go invite her right now." Li Qingshan became even more vigilant, calling the sect master by name, and letting her come here so casually was enough to prove their relationship. "Let's go up first." Hua Sengzan led the way in front. When they arrived at a corner of the building, Li Qingshan felt a white cloud surging under his feet, gently lifting them up. He then saw a small formation engraved on the floor, flashing with light. It was clearly a formation that could create clouds. Seeing Li Qingshan's strange expression, Hua Sengzan teased, "What, thinking of home again?" Li Qingshan said, "Of course. Wasn't this just an elevator? Although the methods used were different, the direction humans pursued in pursuit of pleasure was really not too different." Wu Zhen patted Li Qingshan's shoulder and said with a smile, "Qingshan, I couldn't tell that you like to joke so much." As he rapidly climbed higher and higher, Li Qingshan's eyesight became extremely sharp. He saw that the building was divided into various regions according to the floor. Some regions were equipped with gambling tables and tools, while others were filled with diners who were currently munching away. Of course, the traditional service industry still occupied a very large part of the area. Everyone's faces were brimming with smiles. Even Li Qingshan could not help but be infected by this joyous atmosphere. His mind gradually relaxed, temporarily forgetting about his worries and hatred. He smiled slightly. Hua Sengzan said, "Here, no matter what your identity is, no matter what your interests are, you'll be able to get what you want. It's filled with endless joy." Li Qingshan suddenly felt that something was off. He used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to steady his mind, and the smile on his face immediately vanished. Is there some kind of formation here that affects people's minds? Little N was obviously unaffected, and Qian Rongji's expression did not change either. It probably had something to do with the cultivation method she practiced. That's right. Hua Sengzan nodded. He admired Li Qingshan's sharp senses very much. Li Qingshan said, "Is it fine to confuse people like this?" Wu Zhen said, "What confuse people like this? Don't be an alarmist." Hua Sengzan said, "Wine, women, avarice, and pride. Which one of them doesn't confuse people? Who doesn't like it? Compared to these things, don't you think it's much better to use some minor techniques to make people happy without harming their bodies or minds?" Li Qingshan shook his head slightly. "It's better not to have this kind of joy." Hua Sengzan smiled. "Everyone's drunk, so why are you the only one sober?" Li Qingshan looked into Hua Sengzan's bright eyes and asked, "Are you drunk?" He just felt that Hua Sengzan was not the type of person to indulge in such things. Hua Sengzan blinked. "Haven't you heard of alcohol as an antidote?" The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Wu Zhen said impatiently, "What are you guys talking about?" The surroundings suddenly became quiet. They had arrived at the highest point of the building. The stars were twinkling above their heads, but they were surrounded by the scenery of a garden. There were tall bamboos, rockery, and ponds. There was even a small stream flowing. It was hard to imagine that they were on top of a tall building. There were a few pavilions in the garden, and the sound of stringed instruments could be heard from afar. They walked along the path and bumped into a half-drunk middle-aged man who was being supported by a beautiful woman. Both of them were Qi practitioners, and the man was actually at the 10th layer of the Qi practitioner level. His green robe was wrinkled, and his hands were touching the woman's perky buttocks. Even his beard did not add any sense of dignity to his appearance. When the middle-aged man saw Hua Sengzan, he quickly moved away from the woman's body. He tidied his clothes and acted like a gentleman. It's Commander Hua." Hua Sengzan smiled. "What are you doing here?" The middle-aged man coughed lightly. "I'm collecting some scenery." The woman rubbed his chest and said, "Didn't you say that you want to come to the bed and let me enjoy myself?" The middle-aged man awkwardly scolded, "Don't talk nonsense." The woman only smiled, obviously not afraid of him at all. She even winked at Hua Sengzan. Wu Zhen chuckled. Hua Sengzan stepped aside and said, "Then please go first. Don't delay your business." Wu Zhen said disdainfully, "This old bastard." The middle-aged man walked away in a flustered manner. Li Qingshan asked curiously, "Who is he?" He had seen many high-level Qi practitioners, be it friend or foe. They would always have a certain demeanor, unlike this man who was so disrespectful. Legend of the Great Sage Welcome to the readers. Chapter 267. Wu Zhen said, "That old bastard." Hua Sengzan said, "Shoo, keep it down. What's there to be afraid of? Let's go over." A bamboo building sat in the shade of the bamboo forest. Outside stood two strange-looking stone people holding lanterns. It was filled with an exotic atmosphere. A small stream flowed into the side of the bamboo basket. Li Qingshan followed Hua Sengzan into the building. He saw over a dozen young men and women drinking to the tune of a flowing stream. Every single one of them were Qi practitioners, and none of them were below the 6th layer. Seeing Hua Sengzan enter, a young man with a pale face and a slight beard grabbed Hua Sengzan's sleeve. "Senior brother, you ran away after drinking half a cup. What's that supposed to do? You need to drink 3 cups as punishment." Everyone jeered. 3 cups as punishment. Someone else asked, "Who are those two?" Hua Sengzan said, all right. Stop messing around. Let me introduce 2 friends to you. This is Li Qingshan, and this is Qian Rongji. Both of them want to join our School of Legalism. These are all prodigies of the School of Legalism of our Clear River Prefecture. They might seem a little pathetic, but they really are. I won't introduce them one by one, but let's get along in the future. Before he had even finished speaking, everyone had already begun laughing and cursing him. "You're the pathetic one." Before this, Li Qingshan had already learned a little about the School of Legalism from the Book of All. The current leader of the School of Legalism was the Scarlet Hawk commander, Wang Pushi. The 100 schools of thought were not schools completely cut off from the outside world. Instead, they maintained an extremely close connection with the entire Great Xia Empire. The disciples were extremely free, as long as they paid the tuition fees. They could do whatever they wanted. Of course, the tuition fees came in the form of large amounts of spiritual stones. This kind of freedom was exactly what Li Qingshan liked. It was not as strict and restrictive as a sect, and it was relatively convenient for him to go out and do whatever he wanted. Some disciples of the School of Legalism. They studied in the academy, as well as taking up positions in the Hawkwolf Guard. All they had to do was hunt down a few figures on the blacklist from time to time. The current head disciple of the School of Legalism was Hua Sengzan. Li Qingshan found it particularly hard to refuse. These people were most likely the elite disciples of the School of Legalism, judging from their youthful arrogance. He couldn't hide it no matter what. Li Qingshan cupped his hands in greeting, but no one paid him any mind. Qian Rongji walked out from the back and gracefully bowed, causing many men's eyes to light up. "Well done. Wu General, I told him that he wouldn't come out to play with us for a few days. You said you're a friend from afar, but it turns out you're hiding a mistress." "Stop bullshitting." Wu Zhen refused to admit it, but his face was filled with joy. When everyone saw little, and they exclaimed in admiration again. For a moment, the scene was extremely lively. Hua Sengzan dragged Li Qingshan to the same table. He poured a cup of wine for him and said with a smile, "Wait a moment. Your enemy will arrive in no time." However, this courteous treatment left everyone rather surprised. Although Hua Sengzan treated everyone courteously, his pride was probably no less than anyone else's. It was very rare for him to be so close to someone. Li Qingshan said, "Let's hope it's not a meeting between enemies and making you particularly jealous." Hua Sengzan patted his shoulder. "Don't worry." Li Qingshan smiled. Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind from behind, and his body tensed up like a bowstring. Hua Sengzan patted his hand with a smile, as if he was telling him to relax. A woman hooked her arms around Hua Sengzan and Li Qingshan's neck from behind. A pretty face appeared between the two of them, and she said with a smile, "What enemy?" Li Qingshan felt a softness pressing against his back, and a sweet fragrance assaulted his nose. He was a little shocked because this woman was not one of the disciples who accompanied them to drink, but a disciple of legalism. Her cultivation level was even higher than Wu Zhen's, and she was also in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm. Among the disciples of legalism, she was second only to Hua Sengzan. Hua Sengzan said, "Don't scare him. If he punches you, you won't be able to take it." "Is he willing to?" The woman then turned to Li Qingshan. "Do you think you're willing to?" Her red lips were inches away from his, and the smell of alcohol assaulted his nose. As he moved, the feeling behind his shoulder became clearer. Li Qingshan coughed lightly. Even if I'm willing, I won't be able to hit him. You're really willing? The woman widened her eyes and moved even closer. I can hit him, Li Qingshan thought. Wah, Sungzan introduced. Han Qiongji, second seat of the School of Legalism, the eldest daughter of the Han clan. Han Qiongji said, I'm not happy to hear you say that. What eldest daughter of the Han clan? Brat, just call me senior sister. Oh, right. That little brother of mine didn't come today? Wah Sungzan said, he never comes to places like this. It's not like you don't know. Go away. Don't disturb us from drinking. Han Qiongji said, I'm not leaving. They're all going to surround the new woman, so of course I'm going to surround the new man. Li Qingshan saw that Qian Rongji was indeed mingling with the disciples of legalism. Han Qiongji suddenly felt a gaze directed at her. She turned around and saw Little and staring straight at her. She raised her eyebrows and said unhappily, Little girl, what are you looking at? She's not looking at anyone. Li Qingshan's voice was slightly cold. He pulled Little and into his arms and said with his head lowered, Do you want to eat something? Yo, you're pretty cocky. Han Qiongji raised her voice and attracted a lot of attention. Hua Sungzan secretly cursed. Han Qiongji had a bold and unrestrained personality, but she could not stand a little bit of disobedience. He's just a country bumpkin. Before Han Qiongji could finish, Hua Sungzan shoved a glass of wine into her mouth. Drink your wine. Han Qiongji said, unhappily, why should I? However, she saw that although Hua Sungzan still had a smile on his face, there was already a warning in his eyes. She immediately lost her temper and snatched the glass of wine. I'll drink then. Senior sister is being lectured by Brother Hua again, a female disciple of legalism teased from nearby. I'll rip your mouth to shreds. Han Qiongji shot a glance at Li Qingshan before going off to mess with the girl. Hua Sungzan said, That's just how she is. She doesn't have any ill intentions. Li Qingshan smiled. That's fine. Among ninth-layer Qi practitioners, her personality is pretty good. He would even kill off those with a bad personality. If you go along with her a little, you'll be able to benefit a lot in the 100 schools of thought, no, in the Clear River Prefecture. She doesn't seem to dislike you either. Perhaps you'll even have the opportunity to become the son-in-law of the Han family. Li Qingshan smiled. You better take advantage of this opportunity yourself. Brother Hua. Hua Sungzan laughed aloud. A chuckle rang out from outside. He's already had far too many opportunities. He can't even take advantage of them all. The voice was slightly hoarse, but it was extremely magnetic. The laughter could even infect people's hearts, making them feel happy for some reason. Li Qingshan gazed outside, and a woman stepped through the door. She held a round, peach-blossoming fan in her hand, covering half of her smile. At first glance, she seemed like a sweet girl around 15 or 16 years of age, but her charm and bearing made her seem like a mature, beautiful woman. She also possessed soul-stirring curves, and her perky breasts seemed like they were about to burst out of her clothes. However, her waist was curled tightly, and her round bottom pushed up her pink dress. As she looked around, she had already drawn over everyone's gazes. Although Li Qingshan had seen many great beauties in the past, he still sighed in admiration inside. Who else could possess such beauty other than the school head, Begonia? However, he became even more vigilant. Not a single foundation establishment cultivator could treat her lightly. Sister Cho, why have you come? The fair-skinned, lightly bearded, legalist disciple made his way over. He coveted her inside, but he dared not show it on his face. Begonia greeted everyone with a smile, but when she saw Qian Rongji, she paused. Qian Rongji lowered her head in a hurry, but she only sneered inside. Begonia's gaze finally landed on Li Qingshan's face, but it did not linger on little Anne. She stroked her round fan and sighed in amazement. Heavenly fragrance and beauty, you really are impressive. You're a great disciple of mine. Thank you, Qingzan. A fragrant breeze blew by, and in the blink of an eye, Begonia had already arrived before him. She said to little Anne, "Child, come with me." Li Qingshan said sternly, "Don't even think about it." Begonia waved her round fan like she was swatting away a fly. "You must be Li Qingshan. For the sake of your brother Hua, I'll write off your grievances with my sect." Li Qingshan only saw the images on the fan begin to move. His head spun, and he used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression in a hurry to compose himself. He was just about to take action. A slender, fair hand extended over from one side, flitting through the air like a butterfly, and grabbing Begonia's hand. The round fan immediately stopped. "Haitang, how can you take someone as soon as you see them? You have to ask whether they're willing or not." Hua Sengzan frowned. He had no idea what the aspect of heavenly fragrance and beauty meant to the sect. He had not even had the time to say all the things he had prepared, and she had already come asking for him directly, even using a technique of charm. Begonia was slightly surprised, but it was not because of Hua Sengzan. She had been expecting Hua Sengzan to stop her in the first place, so she was not particularly surprised that Li Qingshan could maintain his composure. However, just now, she had basically used all her techniques of charm on the child, yet the child was actually able to remain unfazed. It was rather unbelievable. However, she did not become dejected. For a moment, her gaze rippled like water, producing many illusions. She asked gently, "Are you willing to go with me?" Little Anne said crisply, "I'm not." Begonia's expression changed slightly. Chapter 268. Only Han Qiongji pursed her lips and thought, "At least this guy has some backbone. He's not like regular men. How could he forget his mother's surname as soon as he sees this loose woman? Originally, I wanted to find an opportunity to teach him a lesson in the future, so I'll just forgive him this once, let alone the men present." Even the women struggled to resist Begonia's charm. Han Qiongji was an exception. The higher one's cultivation, the greater their resistance to charm arts. However, what played a decisive role was still the jealousy of women. Whether it be in terms of cultivation, background, appearance, or figure, Han Qiongji was first-rate. However, Begonia just happened to surpass her no matter where she went. Begonia looked at Hua Sengzan. Hua Sengzan said, "Since it's suspicion, then there's no evidence. Our Hawkwolf Guard will investigate this properly ourselves. It's best if you stop worrying about this, Sect Master Chiu." "Sect Master Chiu? Hua Sengzan, all you know how to do is help an outsider bully me," Begonia said furiously as her eyes reddened slightly. The others had never expected Hua Sengzan to support Li Qingshan so strongly. As a result, the matter became a conflict between Hua Sengzan and Begonia. No, a conflict between the Hawkwolf Guard and the sect. They really had no idea which side to stand on, so they became even more displeased with Li Qingshan. However, at the end of the day, Hua Sengzan was still in charge of them. They all tried to persuade her. "Big Sis Chiu, it's just the death of a minor figure. Let's just forget about it." Li Qingshan looked at Hua Sengzan. He was rather surprised, but he was also rather touched. To him, this was a rare display of kindness. If he were in Hua Sengzan's shoes, he would probably be more willing to help the beautiful Begonia than Li Qingshan, who he had only met once. Begonia said coldly, "Don't even think about it." He said with some bitterness and some helplessness, "Qingzan, 2 of our grannies have gone missing, and even Vice Sect Master Wei's son has died a violent death. This is all deeply connected to Li Qingshan. As the sect master, how can I just let him go so easily? Seeing her like this, everyone felt great pity for her. However, after hearing what she said, he was even more astonished. Han Qiongji said, "Big Sister Qiu, you're not joking, right? Grandma is a 9th layer Qi practitioner, and from what I see, he's just a 6th layer Qi practitioner. How could he be related to the deaths of 2 9th layer Qi practitioners?" Begonia said, "Qian Rongji, come out and talk. How did Vice Sect Master Wei's son die?" Qian Rongji did not say a word. She stood behind the crowd. When she heard that, she knew she could not avoid it. She smiled at Wu Zhen beside her and walked out gracefully. Vice Sect Master Wei's son, Wei Yingjie, has gone to seek revenge against Li Qingshan. His whereabouts are unknown. That was exactly the same as what she had said before, but Begonia's heart skipped a beat. She felt like she had miscalculated. Li Qingshan said loudly, "Listen up, everyone. I was just handling a normal case. This thief has actually come to seek revenge against the Hawkwolf Guard. Even if I did kill him, what's wrong with that?" Some of the disciples of legalism present had already joined the Hawkwolf Guard, and the others would probably join the Hawkwolf Guard too. With the education they had received, sects were all targets that they had to suppress and restrict, yet they had actually come to seek revenge against the Hawkwolf Guard. Not to mention the fact that Wei Yingjie's actions were despicable and had never been on good terms with them, so they felt like it was better for him to die. Li Qingshan saw Qiu Haitang's expression change. Although it was not to the extent where she would attack him in front of so many people, he had already prepared the glazed mirror of invisibility. He was prepared to fend off any assassination along the way. He was bold enough to come here, obviously not only because he trusted Qian Rongji's judgment, but also because he was confident in his strength. Begonia was a foundation establishment cultivator, but the arts of charm she was skilled in were not particularly effective against him. She was probably weaker than the 3 elders in actual combat, and he had collected almost 10 supreme grade talismans on him right now. It was not like he was at the mercy of others. If Begonia really did attack him, she would definitely fail, and then she would have to endure pressure from all sides. Hua Sengzan said, "Forget it. Haikang, this is just a misunderstanding." Begonia said, "If you want me to stop, that's fine, but this has always been a matter between the sect and Li Qingshan." "Li Qingshan, you're also a man. Are you really going to hide behind someone else like this?" Li Qingshan said, "What do you want to do?" Begonia said, "Are you bold enough to gamble with me?" Li Qingshan said, "Sect Master Qiu, you sure know how to joke. You're a mighty foundation establishment cultivator. How am I, Li Qingshan, supposed to gamble with you?" If he could demonify, he would have some confidence, but he definitely would not be able to defeat a foundation establishment cultivator in his human form. Begonia said, "I obviously won't be the one betting with you. His cultivation is only lower than yours. Are you bold enough to gamble with him?" Li Qingshan said, "If we're talking about embroidery, threading needles, and having children, I'm nowhere near as good as he is." Han Qiongji snorted with laughter. She could not tell that he had the appearance of a shameless scoundrel. Hua Sengzan also smiled, but he could tell that Li Qingshan really wanted to gamble, so he did not stop him. Although he promised Gu Yening that he would take care of him, he was not a nanny. As a man, he had to make his own decisions. Li Qingshan did indeed have some thoughts. He did not believe that just a few words from Hua Sengzan would be able to stop the sect from taking revenge and coveting little, and, at most, they would temporarily suppress the conflict, but it would erupt again in the future. He had to rely on himself for everything, And even if the sect was willing to give up, they would have to ask him first. He had long since made up his mind that if he did not drag out these lechers and sluts from the sect and drain their blood one by one, his surname would no longer be Li. When he survived the heavenly tribulation and reached the realm of demon general, he would have to settle the scores between the 3 mountains and the sect. Begonia said, "Naturally, we'll be gambling on what men are good at." Li Qingshan said, "What are we gambling on?" "Drinking, wrestling, and martial arts." Begonia listed the 3. Li Qingshan almost could not help but laugh out loud. These 3 were exactly what he was good at. Chapter 269. The Giant Lumberman. Actually, Li Qingshan had no intentions of humiliating Qiu Haitang, as he had always been speaking from the bottom of his heart. Qiu Haitang could obviously be regarded as a supreme beauty. Just like any other man, he would feel lustful when he saw her, but it would just be lustful. Compared to his familial love for Xiao, and it was nothing. However, out of everyone present, probably only Qian Rongji could truly agree with his thoughts. "I'm willing to be the wager." A delicate voice suddenly rang out. Little Anne, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke up. "Little Anne," Li Qingshan said, and glanced at Li Qingshan. "What are you willing to bet?" The anger in Qiu Haitang's heart was temporarily suppressed by this good news. She said coldly, "My bet is this." She took out a brocade box and opened it, revealing a green pill inside. A misty light spread out and filled the hall. The jade pill looked extremely familiar to Li Qingshan. Wasn't this the same pill that Xianyue had given him? It was precisely this pill that allowed him to skip a long period of accumulation and directly condense a Yao core. Virtue accumulation pill. Han Qiongji cried out in surprise. The other legalism disciples all stared at the pill, their eyes filled with desire. In essence, the virtue accumulation pill was the same type of pill as the qi gathering pill and the qi amassing pill. It helped with cultivation. The reason why it was called the virtue accumulation pill was because consuming one was equivalent to a year's worth of cultivation. Time was a cultivator's greatest enemy. The virtue accumulation pill could help cultivators save a year's time. This kind of pill was an extremely precious pill for cultivators of any level. "You're actually willing to take out this pill?" Hua Sengzan frowned. Using the virtue accumulation pill to exchange for the life of a 6th layer qi practitioner was not a small wager. In fact, it was too heavy. This proved that she was also determined to win this wager. Begonia ignored Hua Sengzan and said to Li Qingshan, "I don't want your head either. If you lose, you'll stay in my sect and be a slave for the rest of your life. In your dreams." Just now, Li Qingshan and Little An exchanged glances. They had already made up their minds. If he lost, he would really have to cut off his head. Of course, he would immediately flee. He was willing to use Little An as a wager because there was no wager at all. Of course, it wasn't that Begonia had not considered this, but she did not believe that a 6th layer qi practitioner could escape right under her nose. This wager was only to shut Hua Sengzan. Li Qingshan pretended to hesitate for a moment before finally agreeing. "All right, wait here. I'll go prepare now." Begonia turned to leave, but she heard Li Qingshan shout, "Wait, leave the wager behind." Begonia turned around and glared at him fiercely. Then she tossed the virtue accumulation pill to Hua Sengzan. "You're the witness." With Qiu Haitang's departure, the disciples of legalism gathered over. None of them dared to underestimate Li Qingshan anymore. Although he was regarded as arrogant and ignorant for being bold enough to challenge a foundation establishment cultivator, his courage was still admirable. However, aside from admiration, there was also deep disgust. Li Qingshan was not strong enough to sway Begonia's heart, which had been built over many years, to his side with just a few words. Wu Zhen said softly, "Brother Hua, why were you falling out with Big Sis Chiu over this kid?" Hua Sengzan only smiled. No one would take what he had said in the past to heart. He said to Li Qingshan, "It's not too late if you say you don't want the wager. With me here, he can't do anything to you." Li Qingshan said, "I'm still quite confident about those three." Wu Zhen sighed. He could tell that Hua Sengzan was determined to stand up to this kid. Han Qiongji slapped Li Qingshan's shoulder. "All right, kid, I think you can do it. Win back the virtue accumulation pill and make the Hawkwolf Guard proud again." An hour later, Begonia returned. "Come with me." She had already recovered her smile without the slightest resentment or anger. The cloud descended from the rooftop slowly. Li Qingshan only heard the rumble of machinery as huge pieces of wood moved out, connecting loudly in the air and separating the floors above the building. It made Li Qingshan think of what he had seen in the town of flowing clouds. Clearly, this building had been designed by the School of Moism as well. When the last two pieces of wood joined together, it formed a huge, empty space. There were at least several hundred Qi practitioners watching from the several floors in the surroundings. It was almost time for the entrance examination of the 100 schools of thought. Most of the foreign Qi practitioners would choose to visit the renowned building of the Clear River Prefecture. Begonia had even set up a wager. Not only could she profit from it, but everyone could bear witness to it as well. This place was like a huge arena. Li Qingshan landed on the ground and stepped on it. It felt extremely sturdy. Afterwards, he made little and weight on one side as he made his way to the center alone. He said loudly, "Sect Master Chiu, where's the person who's betting with me?" Begonia clapped her hands gently, and Li Qingshan saw a door up ahead open loudly. A huge figure walked out slowly with heavy steps, accompanied by a series of rustles. Hua Sengzan said, "Oh no, it's another man." The huge figure had already emerged from the darkness and arrived in the light. The entire building cried out. Li Qingshan had always stood tall and straight, but when the figure arrived before him, all he could do was raise his head. Only then was he able to see his vicious face. His messy beard and hair covered most of his face. The bridge of his nose was high, and his two eye sockets were deeply sunken. His bloodshot eyes shone with a vicious light. Although he looked like a human, he was more than 10 feet tall, almost as tall as 3 people. His muscles were white with a hint of yellow, like wood that had just been chopped. However, his hands, feet, and neck were all shackled with iron chains. Apart from regular humans, there were many other men in the world. They seemed similar to humans, but they possessed many special characteristics, such as long legs for arms and so on. It was said that these other men had once been scattered across the 9 provinces, establishing various tribes and countries. However, as the human race prospered, not only did they purge demons and demons, but these other men were also expelled as other men, gradually vanishing from the sight of regular people. They could only be found in remote, desolate places. This giant was one of the many other men known as the giant lumbermen. They lived deep in the mountains, and it was said that they could absorb nutrients from the earth like trees. They could also grow bigger and bigger like trees, so their bodies were extremely tall, and they were known as the giant lumbermen. Hua Sengzan didn't expect that Begonia would be able to find a giant lumberman to bet with Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's odds were against him this time. Just based on his huge body, he had already lost the drinking and wrestling contest. "Hai Tang, you're using an other man as a bet. Isn't that a bit shameless?" Begonia smiled indifferently. An other man is still a human, and his qi cultivation is definitely not at the 6th layer. Is there something wrong with that? If you want to forfeit, do it now. There's no need to say anything. Although he hadn't reached the 6th layer, the amount of vital chi stored in his huge body was much more than that of a 6th layer chi practitioner. Although Han Qiongji was a bit indignant, she had to admit that this begonia was indeed cunning. She was worthy of being the head of a school and a foundation-building cultivator. When she looked at Li Qingshan's back, which seemed to be petrified with fear, she felt a bit pitiful. Daring to bet with a foundation-building cultivator, he had quite the guts, but his brain was a bit lacking. The little bit of admiration the other legalism disciples had for Li Qingshan disappeared completely, and all of it turned into mockery and ridicule, as if they were looking at an idiot who was trying to break a rock with an egg. Wu Zhen said to Qian Rongji, "It's not his fault. After all, he's from a small place, so he doesn't know how powerful a foundation-building cultivator is." But Qian Rongji said, "That's not necessarily true." Someone upstairs shouted, "Sect Master Cho, are you joking? What's so interesting about this kind of bet?" Begonia said, "Everyone, feel free to place your bets. The spirit stones you win will be a gift to all of you." "Can I place a bet?" Li Qingshan suddenly asked. Hua Sengzan was slightly taken aback. Li Qingshan's voice did not sound discouraged at all. Instead, it was still filled with firm confidence. Begonia's gaze landed on Li Qingshan again, and she said in disdain, "As long as you dare, I'll bet 1,000 spirit stones that I'll win." The entire building was silent for a moment before bursting into laughter. On the 3rd floor, a young man in white was snuggled up to 2 beautiful young girls. One of the young girls said, "Brother Tian, is this person crazy? There have always been a lot of madmen in the world, but if these madmen were gone, wouldn't there be a lot less joy?" The young man's gaze wandered around, sweeping past Qian Rongji and Han Qiongji before landing on Qiu Haitang in the end. One of the young girls said unwillingly, "Brother Tian, you're lusting again. Isn't it enough to have the 2 of us?" The young man in white smiled and said, "It's a waste of youth if you don't flirt." "Sigh, I know that Brother Tian is not someone that people in this world can compare to, and you can't be restricted by worldly thinking. We don't care how many women you have, as long as you have us in your heart." The young man in white said affectionately, "You'll always be my treasures." Qian Rongji felt the gaze from above, but she did not mind it. She heard Wu Zhen beside her say with a smile, "He's still so good at joking. Anyway, if he loses, he'll be a slave for life. His things don't belong to him anymore, so there's no loss in betting." However, Qian Rongji said, "I'll bet 500 spirit stones that Li Qingshan will win." Wu Zhen was stunned, and his face darkened. "What are you doing?" He really suspected that Qian Rongji and Li Qingshan had some relationship. Qian Rongji smiled and said, "I think I can win." Hua Sengzan suddenly said, "Then I'll also bet 1,000 spirit stones. I also think I can win." Chapter 270. Begonia ignored the giant lumberman's hostility. "If you lose, do you know what will happen to you?" The giant lumberman growled and turned around helplessly, facing Li Qingshan. At this moment, hundreds of jars of wine were brought up and placed aside. Not far away, a long stick of sandalwood incense was placed in an incense burner. "We'll use the incense as the time. Whoever drinks the most within 2 hours wins." Begonia clapped her hands lightly. The giant lumberman almost pounced over and grabbed a jar of wine. He gulped it down as if he was venting. The huge jar of wine was more like a big cup to him. In an instant, the jar of wine was emptied, and he threw it to the side. Based on this momentum alone, those who originally had faith in Li Qingshan felt that Li Qingshan would definitely lose. Li Qingshan walked over unhurriedly and opened the jar. He opened his mouth and sucked, like a whale sucking in water. A sparkling stream of wine entered his mouth. In an instant, the jar of wine was emptied. He praised, "Good wine." The aroma of the wine was rich and strong. Although it was not as good as spiritual wine, it was still a rare fine wine. As it entered the throat, there was a burning pleasure. The giant lumberman glanced at him and gulped down the third jar of wine. Li Qingshan's interest in drinking was aroused. From the moment Oxen taught him to drink, he fell in love with the taste. However, after coming to Jiaping City, he was troubled by many things and could not drink to his heart's content. He felt rather regretful. Tonight, he could finally drink to his heart's content. Li Qingshan sat down as if there was no one else around. With one hand on the jar of wine, he said to Begonia, "There's wine without meat. It's lacking some flavor." Han Xiongji was surprised. At this time, other people would complain that their stomachs were not big enough, but he still wanted to eat. Begonia said, "Humph, be a hypocrite, and give it to him." A moment later, a long table was carried in front of Li Qingshan. In the middle was a roasted lamb and a roasted pig. Around it were roasted chicken, duck, and crystal pork knuckles. All kinds of meat that a normal person could think of. Everything was available. Li Qingshan didn't pick up the chopsticks. Instead, he grabbed the crystal pork knuckle and took a bite. It was fragrant but not greasy and melted in his mouth. He praised, "Good taste." Wu Zhen said that all the famous chefs in Qinghe were gathered in the restaurant. It was indeed true. Only then did Li Qingshan start to drink. The giant lumberman had already drunk the 7th jar of wine. Li Qingshan did not even glance in that direction. He continued to eat and drink by himself. Unlike the giant lumberman who kept his head down the alcohol, everyone could tell that he was enjoying this process. He finished the jar of alcohol. "I'll just take another jar. I won't deliberately increase my speed." Yet he drank very quickly. After a while, several jars of wine were drunk, and the roasted suckling pig was already in his stomach. Those who weren't hungry couldn't help but smack their lips and salivate when they saw him like this. Han Xiongji asked Hua Sengzan, "Can he win?" She was provoked by Hua Sengzan, so she gritted her teeth and bet 500 spiritual stones on Li Qingshan. Afterwards, she felt a little heartache. 500 spiritual stones was enough to buy a slightly inferior top-grade spiritual weapon. Hua Sengzan said, "It won't be easy. He has opened his sea of Reiki, so his cultivation level is slightly higher. But he drank so fast that he might not be able to refine the alcohol in time. He's not as tall as the giant lumberman, so he'll be at a disadvantage." Han Qiongji said, "Then why did you bet 1,000 spiritual stones? I thought you were confident." "It's not that I'm confident. It's him." 2/3 of the incense had burned down, and the giant lumberman had drunk another 10 jars. Li Qingshan had drunk 14 jars, so there were only 8 jars between them. The giant lumberman's pale yellow skin had already turned red, and it began to sway. It had no choice but to sit down like Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, sat there steadily. His bronze face did not change color, but it was clear that he was getting more drunk. However, he drank faster and faster, which was how people who were in the mood to drink began to drink. Everyone could see who was winning. Han Qiongji grabbed Hua Sengzan's shoulder and said excitedly, "Maybe we can win." Hua Sengzan smiled. This kid really had a way. He had almost forgotten that Hua Sengzan had trained his body to begin with. Although eating and drinking at the same time occupied his stomach, he did not get drunk easily. Moreover, he strictly controlled his speed and used his vital qi to slowly dispel the wine. If he had known that Li Qingshan did not think so much and was only savoring the taste of the wine, and did not even dispel the wine, who knew what expression he would have. No matter how smart he would never have thought that the person in front of him was a big monster. Hua Sungzan's eyes met Begonia's. Hua Sungzan bowed slightly, as if to express his apology. Begonia showed some hidden bitterness. Can I move your heart in the end? The giant lumberman saw that Li Qingshan was gradually catching up and became anxious. He grabbed the wine and gulped it down. This made him even more drunk, and he did not have enough time to dispel the wine. There was only a little of the incense left, and with a loud bang, the giant lumberman fell to the ground. The wine jar in his hand fell to the ground, and half a jar of wine spilled all over the ground. Li Qingshan stood up and burped. He gulped down the last jar of wine and looked around. Is there no more? It seemed that he had not had enough. The incense turned to ashes. There was silence. We won. Han Qiongji waved her fist and broke the silence. There was a commotion upstairs and downstairs, and it was noisy. No one expected that the giant lumberman would lose to an ordinary person in drinking. Many people shouted, "Cheating!" Not only did they bet on the outcome of the whole round, but there were also people who bet on the outcome of a single round. Many people who wanted to earn some spirit stones easily lost their hard-earned spirit stones. Instead, Li Qingshan laughed loudly, and his loud laughter suppressed all the criticism. He said to Begonia, "Clan Master Chiu, do I win this round?" The wine helped his desire, and his eyes unscrupulously sized her up. Begonia said, "I'll let you have a taste of the sweetness first." Li Qingshan glanced at the drunken giant lumberman on the ground. "I'm afraid there's no way to compete with the next round." Chiu Haiteng said coldly, "Get up." The giant lumberman trembled and got up from the ground shakily. With the help of his vital energy, he sobered up very quickly. Begonia took out a small cauldron from her 100 treasures pouch and tossed it into the field. With a bang, the small cauldron grew 10 times bigger in the air and turned into a large bronze cauldron. Li Qingshan felt a tremor under his feet. The cauldron weighed more than 1,000 pounds. Begonia said, "The ancient strongmen are said to have the power to resist cauldrons. The second round is to lift this cauldron." Li Qingshan said, "You're the owner of the cauldron. If you help me secretly, won't I lose without knowing why?" Begonia frowned. "What do you want?" She didn't have such intentions. She didn't believe that Li Qingshan could be stronger than the giant lumberman. The giant lumberman was born with a physique that was far stronger than ordinary people. After she bought him, she taught him the art of physique tempering. In order to escape, he trained day and night, and his strength was astonishing. When she wasn't around, she could only chain him up. Even high-level Qi practitioners couldn't subdue him. "Since I'm the witness, I'll take out the cauldron." As Hua Sungzan spoke, he also tossed out a 3-legged cauldron. Begonia snorted, but she believed that Hua Sungzan wouldn't be biased. She kept the cauldron. "Now you have nothing to say, right?" Li Qingshan walked to the front of the cauldron. The cauldron was shining brightly. It was a rare spirit instrument. He stretched out his long arm and grabbed the handle of the cauldron with one hand. "Idiot! How can one hand be enough?" Han Chongji shouted. Wu Zhen laughed mockingly and said to Qian Rongji, "This Li Qingshan probably hasn't seen a crafting cauldron before. It's much heavier than a cauldron forged from copper and iron. Even I can't lift it with one hand." Before he finished speaking, Li Qingshan had already lifted the crafting cauldron with one hand. He raised it above his head and casually threw it to the giant lumberman. "It's your turn." Wu Zhen was speechless. "P.S. The 3rd chapter is yours." "Phew, let's take a break and prepare to write the chapter tomorrow morning. Today was really tiring. Legends of the Great Sage. Welcome readers to log in. He gritted his teeth, and his Dantian sea of qi started to spin. Streams of true qi rushed out and flowed towards his limbs and bones, turning into waves of soft, water-like force, which dissolved the impact of the huge cauldron. Li Qingshan was pushed back more than 10 steps by the huge cauldron. His feet dragged 2 deep tracks on the ground. He pushed with his right foot and suddenly stopped his body. With a crack, the sole of his foot sank into the ground. Li Qingshan held the huge cauldron firmly. He grinned and shouted, "Here you go." He suddenly took a step forward, gathered all the strength in his body, swung his arms, and threw the huge cauldron. The huge cauldron flew out with an even more ferocious force than when it came. The giant lumberman's eyes were filled with fear. He looked at Begonia, roared, and reached out with both hands, ready to die. The moment his hands touched the huge cauldron, he knew that this force was not something he could withstand. His internal organs were about to be crushed, and he could only close his eyes and wait for death. A strong wind blew in his face, but there was no impact. He opened his eyes, and the huge cauldron suddenly stopped in front of him, only a few feet away. The giant lumberman blinked, as if wondering what was going on. He looked down and saw a young man in black catching the huge cauldron in his hands. The young man in black turned around, revealing a handsome face with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. However, his face seemed to be made of ice, and there was a sense of coldness. He said coldly, "Let's stop here. You've already lost." The giant lumberman looked disappointed, but he looked at the young man in black gratefully. If it were not for this young man in black, he might not have been able to keep his life. The young man in black threw the huge cauldron to Hua Sungzan. The cauldron flew into Hua Sungzan's hands and returned to the size of a palm. He guided his true qi and sent it into his 100 treasures pouch. He said to the young man in black, who suddenly appeared, "Che, why are you here?" Han Qiongji waved and said, "Hey, brother!" The young man in black did not seem to see them and turned to look at Li Qingshan. He said coldly, "Not bad at body refinement." "Well said." Li Qingshan saw it very clearly. Just now, after he threw the cauldron, the young man in black came out from the side. Like an agile black panther, he caught the cauldron even though he moved later. His body was so strong that even Li Qingshan was a little surprised. Could this be the legendary body refinement cultivator? When the young man in black caught the cauldron, he did not take it forcefully. Instead, he gently pushed the cauldron and used a skillful force to show off his extremely high martial arts skills. Hua Sungzan seemed to be used to the young man's coldness. He introduced the first seat of the school of the military, Han Tie. The person who said, "I'm the strongest under foundation building," must have never seen him before. Li Qingshan nodded slightly, agreeing with Hua Sungzan. Not only was Han Tie's body strong, his cultivation level was also at the 10th layer of the Qi practitioner. Cultivating both at the same time, it would be hard for any Qi practitioner to be his match. He cupped his hands and said, "Li Qingshan." Han Tie ignored him. He turned to the frowning Begonia and said, "How many spirit stones is this inhuman worth? I'll buy it." Hua Sungzan sighed softly. "Haitang, you've lost." Begonia clenched and unclenched her fists as if she was unwilling to accept this result. In the end, she sighed and said, "Fine, Li Qingshan, the grudge between you and the school is written off. You'd better not appear in front of me again." If she insisted that it was Han Tie who interrupted the competition, she could drag it to the 3rd round. However, she was not the kind of woman who would pester endlessly. Moreover, based on Li Qingshan's performance just now, even if he dragged it to the 3rd round, it would still be difficult for him to win. Instead, it would be better for her to admit defeat. However, that Tao accumulation pill really made her heart ache. She hated Li Qingshan, so much that she gnashed her teeth. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "Let's hope the heavens do as they wish." With a few thousand spirit stones in his account and the Tao accumulation pill in his hands, he would probably be able to knock on the door leading to the realm of Demon General. As for whether or not he would appear in front of her, it was not up to her to decide. "Good lad, well done." Han Qiongji came over and patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. The contempt in the eyes of the legalism disciples completely disappeared. Just based on the strength of the cauldron tossing alone, there were not many among them who were a match for him. To be praised by the bone-chilling Han Tie was extremely rare. No wonder Hua Sengzan valued him so much. Even Wu Zhen could not help but admit that this country bumpkin truly was extraordinary. He glanced at Qian Rongji with mixed emotions, but all he saw was her smile. She did not show any great joy at all. Her demeanor particularly tempted him. Some people were happy, while others were worried. As Begonia admitted defeat, the entire building was in an uproar. They had thought that they would definitely win the bet, but they had actually lost. Furthermore, they had lost so thoroughly that they did not even get to the third round. "This won't do. This is a trap. Refund the spirit stones." Someone shouted. This immediately won a lot of responses, and they loudly shouted for the door to refund the spirit stones. Many Qi warriors had thrown out hundreds of spirit stones. For many Qi warriors, that was their entire fortune. How could they bear to see all of it vanish in the blink of an eye? "Does anyone doubt my notarization?" The smile on Hua Sengzan's face disappeared. He raised his head and looked around. Wherever his gaze swept past, the clamoring immediately subsided. "Brother Tian, we lost." "Forget it. It's just 1,000 spirit stones. It's nothing." The white-robed young man pretended not to care, but his heart felt like it was bleeding. He had not brought many spirit stones with him when he came to the 100 schools of thought. Now, almost half of them were gone. He muttered, "Li Qingshan," and stormed off with a wave of his sleeve. "How many spirit stones?" Han Tie asked Begonia again. He was determined to get that mutant. "Since you, Tie, want him, how can I accept your spirit stones? Take him away." Begonia threw out a contract. The giant lumberman stared at the thin piece of paper. He almost couldn't help but reach out to grab it. However, even if he grabbed it and tore it up, it would not have any effect. Hua Sengzan said, "My bet is off. Consider it as me buying this mutant." Li Qingshan thought to himself, this brother Hua is really rich. He didn't want a few thousand spirit stones just like that. It shows that his relationship with Han Tie is not ordinary. Begonia glared at Hua Sengzan and said, "I said I'm giving it to Tie, so I'm giving it to Tie. Even if you want your bet, I won't give it to you." Han Tie took the contract. His expression was still cold. He didn't thank Hua Sengzan or Begonia. He just waved his hand, and the contract immediately turned into powder. He even said to the giant lumberman, "You're free now. Come to the 100 schools of thought the day after tomorrow and join the school of military." It was a command, cold and unquestionable. He looked at Li Qingshan and then at Hua Sengzan. He didn't say anything and walked away. Hua Sengzan touched his nose and smiled bitterly. At least he gave me some face. He didn't steal my disciple. That was giving him face. Li Qingshan realized that it was not that Han Tie didn't give him face. Just now, he was born with a dead face and didn't give a damn about anyone. He also noticed that Han Tie's stride length and frequency were always the same. There was no difference at all. It was as precise and monotonous as a clock. Was this the demeanor of a disciple of the School of Military? Maybe the School of Military was a good choice. Biography of the great sage welcome readers to log in. Chapter 272. The giant lumberman returned to his senses and bellowed at the figure with a strange tone. "I'm definitely going." It was not just out of gratitude towards Han Tie for saving his life. Even though giant lumberjacks had gained freedom, other folk were basically unable to move around in this world. They might still be captured and turned into slaves. And Han Tie's footsteps did not change at all, as if he did not hear it at all, or perhaps he had already anticipated it. He vanished in the blink of an eye. Han Qiongji muttered, "What a weird temper." Li Qingshan secretly admired him. Han Tie seemed cold and aloof, but he possessed the bearing of a great general. To be able to stand out among the hundreds of millions of people in the Clear River Prefecture and become the primary disciple of the school of the military, he truly was anything but ordinary. That's just how he is. Don't take offense. Hua Sungzan passed the embroidered box with the virtue accumulation pill to Li Qingshan, which made the disciples of legalism green with envy. Many of them had heard of this before, but they had never eaten it before. Li Qingshan gazed at the pill Xianyue had given him in the past and sighed slightly inside. Even foundation establishment cultivators treated these virtue accumulation pills as treasures, yet Xianyue had taken them out by the handfuls, just like how he took out qi gathering pills. A while later, Begonia also ordered someone to deliver the several thousand spiritual stones. Li Qingshan had one. The eyes of the onlookers grew redder and redder. Several thousand spirit stones was a huge sum of money to any qi practitioner. Han Qiongji had won quite a lot too, so her gaze towards Li Qingshan became more and more amiable. Her previous displeasure had already been tossed to the back of her mind. She remained unfazed as she looked at Li Qingshan. "I couldn't tell, but you sure are rich." If he were a regular qi practitioner, he would definitely be overjoyed after receiving a virtue accumulation pill and several thousand spiritual stones. He would never be able to remain so composed. He had even wagered 1,000 spiritual stones without batting an eye. Even the young masters of clans would struggle to be so generous. Furthermore, his body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mysterious aura. He was praising the demeanor of others. The others were also praising him, be it Han Qiongji or Hua Sungzan. Even Begonia didn't view him as an ordinary sixth-layer qi warrior anymore. "Senior Sister Han, don't tell me you've fallen for Qingshan." Wu Zhen said somewhat enviously. In their circle, Han Qiongji was like a big sister. She had extraordinary talent, a forthright personality, and was beautiful. As they bumped into each other, many people began to have thoughts, and Wu Zhen was one of them. But she was also extremely arrogant. "I don't care about ordinary men. I'm only close to Hua Sungzan." However, when he confessed his love to her, he was silenced by the words, "surpass me in terms of cultivation." Gradually, he gave up on the idea and only treated her as an elder sister. However, when he saw her express her love to another man, he could not help but feel rather displeased. The other legalist disciples joined in. Qingshan is so strong, so he must be very impressive in that aspect. No wonder Senior Sister Han likes him. Han Qiongji, however, could not be provoked. She wrapped her arm around Li Qingshan's shoulder. "I think he's much stronger than you cowards." She was not short, but there was still a gap between her and Li Qingshan. With her arm around Li Qingshan, she seemed like she was leaning on him. They really did seem like a couple. She even countered, "Rongji, aren't you?" "You're right, Senior Sister Han." Qian Rongji smiled. She had already seen it clearly. In this circle, the person she could not afford to offend the most was not Hua Sungzan, but Han Qiongji. Although Hua Sungzan was shrewd, he still had his pride as a man after all. He would not do anything to a woman like her. When Han Qiongji became reckless, She really would deal with her regardless of the consequences. As for whether what she said would displease these men, there was even less of a need to worry. Men would respect beautiful women who displeased them. Wu Zhen immediately felt an intense pressure. Originally, he did not treat Li Qingshan as an opponent. Whether it be his appearance, background, or cultivation, Li Qingshan paled in comparison to him. Li Qingshan's speech and knowledge paled even further. He was just a country bumpkin with some talent and luck. Even though he seemed to have some ties with Qian Rongji, he did not take it to heart. But now, he no longer had that confidence. Han Qiongji laughed aloud. I found you rather annoying in the beginning, but I like you a little now. She patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. Qingshan, once you're at the 100 schools of thought, cultivate well. If you can catch up to my cultivation, I'll give you a chance. What do you think? It was not like she had never seen a man before. It was impossible for her to fall in love so easily. At most, she acknowledged and praised Li Qingshan slightly. Most of what she said was encouragement. She did not believe that Li Qingshan could actually surpass her in cultivation. Although there were only 3 layers between the 6th layer and the 9th layer, from the 6th layer onwards, every layer was a challenge. The time spent was counted in years. To be able to open all 8 extraordinary meridians in 10 years was already considered not slow. However, with her talent, she might have already become a foundation establishment cultivator by then. It was basically impossible, so she did not think about it anymore. In the cultivation world, even if there were feelings between men and women, the gap between cultivation levels was an insurmountable chasm. In the mortal world, there might be legends of rich girls eloping with poor scholars, but female cultivators would never submit to male cultivators whose cultivation levels were lower than theirs. This was not a simple case of fawning on the rich and powerful. Comparing foundation establishment cultivators and qi practitioners, the difference in lifespan alone was more than 100 years. Li Qingshan pursed his lips and did not reply. Although Han Qiongji did not have the looks or the figure, he could not serve her personality. He had seen too many unruly girlfriends in his previous life. After transmigrating, he had to change his taste. Han Qiongji immediately became angry. She frowned and said, "What? Do you still think I'm not good enough for you?" Wu Zhen said, "I think you have some self-awareness." The other legalist disciples also agreed. Wu Zhen was not the only one who felt jealous. Li Qingshan swept his gaze over them. He knew that he had already offended this group of people today. Wood Kuei nodded and trailed far behind the crowd, especially keeping a safe distance from Li Qingshan. The cauldron that Li Qingshan had tossed out had almost cost him his life. Wu Zhen glanced backwards in some disgust. "Brother Hua, are we really going to bring him along? I really don't know what Brother Han is thinking. No matter how talented and mutant is, he's still a mutant. He has a feud with us. Who knows when he'll stab us in the back?" Hua Sengzan was non-committal. He has his own thoughts. Giant lumberfolk are amiable and don't like fighting and killing. When we fought against the mutants in the past, we mainly fought against mutants like the fire-devouring folk and the winged folk. The giant lumberfolk are also divided into many clans. He casually introduced the habits and lifestyle of the giant lumberfolk like he was familiar with them. He displayed his vast knowledge, which made the disciples of legalism sigh in amazement. As Wood Kuei listened to Hua Sengzan talk about his hometown in the distant mountains in the south, he became dejected. He was almost on the verge of tears. Suddenly, he felt a figure approach him. Looking up, he saw that it was Li Qingshan. He could not help but be alarmed and raise his guard, but all he saw was an extremely resplendent smile. Chapter 273. Ever since Li Qingshan carried Han Qiongji, He knew he could not get along with these elite legalist disciples, so he did not join them either. He purposefully lagged behind them. He had always been very interested in the giant lumberman, but he could not afford to be distracted during the battle. The battle was already over. As he listened to Hua Sungzan's introduction, he found it even more difficult to hold back. There were actually such strange humans in the world, and they were not the only ones. There were also fire devourers and winged folk. Who knew what they were like? Traveling across the 9 provinces and seeing all the beautiful sights and wonders of the world was also his vow. Are all of you giant lumbermen surnamed Mu? Would Kuei nodded stiffly. Where's your homeland? Would Kuei tightened his jaw. He was extremely cautious. Was he planning to target his own clansmen? All right, let's change the question. Are there other folk in your homeland? Would Kuei did not answer. Li Qingshan suddenly extended his hand. Would Kuei almost instinctively wanted to retaliate, but Li Qingshan only tapped his wood-like skin. You really aren't a wooden person. Of course. Would Kuei replied in a strange tone. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just now, this man who was as fierce as a tiger was like a curious child, but he did not have any ill intentions or discrimination. Li Qingshan said, "One day, I'll definitely visit your homeland, whether you agree or not." Just the thought of a large group of tall lumbermen was extremely interesting. Wood Kuei said, "If you don't have any ill intentions, I can take you there." However, his homeland was so far away. At this moment, Begonia suddenly appeared, blocking in front of Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan and Wood Kuei were both surprised. They were almost tempted to strike immediately against the same enemy, the shackles from before. Naturally dispelled, Hua Sungzan said, "Hai Tang." Li Qingshan said, "Looks like the heavens don't follow one's wishes. I don't want to see you again, but we do." Begonia ignored him, her gaze landing on Little, and again, "If this child follows you, it will only be a waste of her excellent talent. As long as you nod, all the resources of the sect can be used by her, and she will be the future leader of the sect. I can promise anything to her." Everyone was surprised. The promise was a little too much. Although Begonia had miscalculated today and lost, their sect was still one of the best sects in the Clear River Prefecture. The resources we have, although it could not compare to the major schools like the Confucian School and the Legalist School, it was superior to the minor schools like the Music School and the Medicine School. Most importantly, the resources of the Bai clan were not freely given to their disciples. The disciples had to complete all sorts of tasks and even compete with each other. In the end, many people would still divide the rewards. Even the resources that Hua Sungzan received from the School of Legalism could not compare to this promise. That was the attitude of a sect willing to pour all of its strength into nurturing a person. All Qi practitioners would be interested. Hua Sungzan was surprised too. Was the heavenly fragrance and beauty really that important to the Bai clan? Then he studied Little, and he could not help but admit that he was indeed an extremely handsome child. He was the type that could tell with a single glance that he possessed talent as a Qi practitioner, but no one could be certain just how great his talent was. He could only find out after a test. And to be honest, he did not like this child too much, as he did not seem like a child at all. Not only did he not possess the liveliness and cleverness that children his age should possess, but his gaze when he looked at people would actually make him shiver. Li Qingshan only smiled in response to this great temptation. Although the title of sect master and vice sect master only differed by a single word, it was worlds apart. Although foundation establishment and the 10th layer were only separated by a single layer, it was like a chasm. "It's so late. What's the matter?" Begonia said coldly. Wei Zhongyuan said furiously, Li Qingshan is so arrogant, and he's deeply connected to Ing Jie's death. He's a mortal enemy of our sect. Are you really going to spare him for that Hua guy, sect master? Begonia said, that Hua guy is the Scarlet Wolf commander. Last time, I let you do whatever you want, which has already infuriated him. I admit defeat, so there's no need for you to say anything more. I'm tired. Wei Zhongyuan's thoughts immediately turned cold. He gritted his teeth. If that's the case, I'll be taking my leave for now. In the end, he studied Begonia viciously. Lust and greed filled his eyes. Once I reach Foundation establishment, I'll show you. He would never spare Li Qingshan. Chapter 274. Begonia's lily-white hand paused. Her long fingernails had already touched Qian Rongji's skin. Just a moment more, and her brain would have burst open. Qian Rongji's eyes were still blank, as if she couldn't feel the tightened veil around her. Begonia laughed at herself. She had miscalculated twice today, which actually made her doubt her own art of enchantment. How could a mere sixth-layer aura refining cultivator resist her enchantment? She then asked, then how did the two grannies Shimen and Shimen die? Qian Rongji answered. A moment later, Begonia had a general understanding of the matter. She looked straight into Qian Rongji's eyes. From today onwards, I will accept you as my direct disciple. You must be absolutely loyal to me, and you can't deceive me. Her eyes flashed, turning these words into an unshakable seed in her heart, deeply planting it into Qian Rongji's heart. Then she let out a light sigh, revealing a bit of exhaustion. The veil dispersed, and Qian Rongji fell to the ground. As if she had just woken up from a great dream, she roused from her daze. She shook her head and saw Qiu Haitang. She blurted out, "Master!" Then she covered her mouth, her face full of surprise. Not to mention that she had already been expelled from the sect. Even in the sect, she was only fit to call her sect master. Art of enchantment. For people like Li Qingshan and Little and who cultivated special cultivation methods and divine abilities, it might not be considered much, but its true use, once it was unleashed, it was terrifyingly strong. The school of Moism could only control puppets, and the corpse refiners could only control corpses, but they could control living people. As a spell that had an extremely high requirement for talent, it could still be passed down to this day without being lost, which showed how amazing it was. Qiu Haitang said, "Should I thank you?" Qian Rongji said, "Disciple doesn't dare. Disciple was just lucky." Then what about the two grannies Shimen and Shimen? Was it also your luck? Begonia suddenly asked. She was very suspicious and asked the same question she had asked just now. Under the charm, Qian Rongji should not have any memories. Qian Rongji frowned and said, "Master knows that Wei Yingjie is just an idiot. How can he compare to the two grannies? He could kill the two grannies. Only 10th layer Qi practitioners or even Foundation establishment cultivators can do it. I think Vice Sect Master Wei is a little suspicious." "That's not something you should say," Begonia said solemnly, but the corners of her mouth lifted into a smile. Her behavior was exactly the same as just now. He looked at Qian Rongji condescendingly. "No matter how ruthless and calculative you are, in the face of absolute power, you can't do anything. It was also completely useless. From today onwards, your talent in scheming will be used by me." Qian Rongji said fearfully, "Yes, master." But in his heart, he was sneering, "Absolutely loyal to you, never deceive you? This kind of wishful thinking is what you want to say to Hua Sungzan the most." Everything was going as planned. Everyone was used to using what they were best at, just like how it was impossible for the disciples of the Sword Collection Palace to not use swords, and it was impossible for the disciples of the Burial Mound Mountain to not use zombies. It was impossible for Begonia not to use her charm technique. Compared to scheming, as expected, Clan Master Chiu was still more used to directly controlling his opponent's mind. When Begonia revolved her mana and used her charm technique, Qian Rongji felt her consciousness being destroyed and receding like the tide. The shallow enchantment that she had cultivated did not help her, and the calming pill that she had taken earlier did not have any effect either. In front of the power of a Foundation establishment cultivator, she prepared and defended. It was not worth mentioning. However, these were just smokescreens. What she was truly relying on was the deep understanding of enchantment that she had gained through her cultivation during this period of time. Therefore, she was fearless. It was impossible for her to be controlled by Begonia. Not even she herself could do it. In the past, she had grown up with hatred that was as deep as the ocean, but for the sake of revenge, she was forced to wear layers upon layers of masks. Suppressing herself and hiding her hatred was not as easy as she imagined it to be. Apart from absolute rationality, nothing could suppress the flames of hatred. However, as time went by, everything developed in a way that completely exceeded her expectations. At some point in time, revenge was no longer the most important thing to her. If Qian Yannian was willing to hand over the position of leader of the Qian family to her, she could even continue holding it in for the sake of becoming stronger. The flames of hatred that had burned her for almost a decade began to dim, and powerless. Rationality overwhelmed her hatred, and her methods overpowered her goals. As a result, when she got what she wanted and succeeded in her revenge, she was finally able to peel off her layers of masks, but she discovered that there was only emptiness beneath. As a result, she wept bitterly, but she did not achieve enlightenment and cleanse herself, nor did she cast aside her cleaver and become a Buddha. She only wiped away her tears and continued down her path through rationality. Human instincts and emotions were still providing meager motivation, growing and entangling like vines naturally, even if the vines did not know the meaning behind it. That dazed state was not feigned. However, absolute rationality was still driving this body. It was ridiculous that Begonia still wanted to use such a low-level method to test her. The last seed of thought that Begonia had planted was insignificant compared to the seed of hatred that she had planted for herself. However, even hatred could not control her. How can Master's pure and clean body be tainted by this old man? I think that apart from Commander Hua, no one else is worthy of Master. If you really think so, then I'm relieved. Begonia's expression softened a little. She thought to herself, you can't possibly have any other thoughts other than this. Sure enough, Qian Rongji said, as a disciple, even if I have to go through fire and water, I will help Master to get what she wants. As for that Li Qingshan, I will not let him go. Although disciples' cultivation is shallow, even if I have to perish together with him, I will take revenge for Master. The gamble had been won, and it was time to collect the money. Begonia took out a jade scroll from her 100 treasures pouch. It is inconvenient for others to know about our relationship, and Master cannot teach you every day. Chapter 275. Could it be that Hua Sengzan also had feelings for Gu Yenying? From a man's point of view, this was simply too normal. It would be abnormal if he didn't have feelings for her. However, they had only just met each other, and asking such a question was a little too much. Hua Sengzan said, in that case, I wish you good luck as well. I wish you good luck in your cultivation and become the son-in-law of the Han family as soon as possible. The two of them looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. Before they knew it, they had left Clear River City and passed through the invisible formation. Outside the city, The grass was lush and the nightingales were chirping. It was spring. Although it was night, the fragrance of various flowers still assailed their nostrils. "Let's hurry up." As he spoke, Hua Sungzan summoned the silver dragon horse from the seal. He pulled on the reins, and the silver dragon horse raised its front hooves, neighed loudly, and galloped away with the wind. It was as if the horse wanted to dispel its worries. Li Qingshan rode on a cloud, and followed closely behind with Little, and Wood Kuei, the giant lumberman, strode forward, but his speed was not slow. In less than a quarter of an hour, they saw a city wall that rose and fell. It was surrounded by mountains, and the lights were flickering in the darkness. Li Qingshan exclaimed in astonishment, "This is the Hua family?" In terms of scale, the land of a single family surpassed even Qingyang City. In terms of grandeur and beauty, even 100 Qingyang cities paled in comparison. The clan has been around for a long time, so there will be more people. Hua Sungzan reined in his horse in front of the city gate. On top of the city wall, a group of guards patrolled past. Each and every one of them was brimming with vigor and vitality. Not only were they Qi practitioners, but there were also signs of physique refinement. "Young master is back." A shout came from the top of the city gate, and the gate that was dozens of feet tall opened with a loud bang. Hua Sungzan rode his horse in first, but Li Qingshan could sense that the city gates were not the only thing that had been opened. There was also the formation that enveloped the entire Hua family. As soon as he stepped into the formation, he immediately sensed the dense spiritual qi in the surroundings. It was even denser than the secluded cultivation cavern of the Hawkwolf Guard in Jiaping City. The location chosen by the Hua family was an excellent spiritual land. Not only did this formation have the function of defense, it was also a gigantic spiritual energy gathering formation. One could imagine how great of an advantage it was to cultivate here compared to ordinary rogue cultivators. Even if ordinary people lived here, their bodies would be stronger than those outside, and they would not get sick. After entering the city gate, there was a broad road that led directly to a tower-like building in the center of the city. Apart from this building, there were no other particularly tall buildings. The arched eaves were hidden in the shade of the trees. The entire city was like a large garden, and the buildings were just decorations. Lush greenery, winding corridors, rockeries, and ponds. Every step one took was a different scenery, too much for the eye to take in. However, the overall layout seemed to coincide with the Tao of the five elements, resonating with the formation. Jewels were embedded everywhere in the city, emitting a faint glow in the darkness, illuminating the roads. After crossing the small bridge, Hua Sungzan brought them to the front of a pavilion. A small river flowed in front of the pavilion, and behind the pavilion was a forest. Hua Sungzan said, "My residence is not far from here. It's just in that direction. The places that are surrounded by the stream are all my territories. You can walk around as you please, but it's best not to wander around outside. It's getting late. You should take a rest first." Hua Sungzan briefed them. Then he took his leave in a courteous manner. Li Qingshan and Little and entered the pavilion to rest. Wood Kuei went to the back of the pavilion and stood together with the trees. He put his bare feet on the ground, stood up straight, and closed his eyes. The next morning, Li Qingshan sat cross-legged in front of the small stream. The small stream was sparkling and translucent. Under the illumination of the sun, the surrounding scenery became more and more pleasing to the eye. Looking around, it was as if he was in a painting. The pavilion, hidden by the trees, did not seem out of place at all. Instead, it added a lot of liveliness to it, taking the phrase being one with nature to the extreme. Li Qingshan's mind became calmer too. He took out an item from his 100 treasures pouch. It was a small jade green sword. The sword was only a foot long, and it only had a blade. It did not have a hilt. Net, the blade was as thin as a strand of hair, vaguely transparent and covered in fine ripples. With a gentle flick, it trembled like water. After reaching the 6th layer, he could control artifacts. Ever since Li Qingshan emerged from seclusion, he had directly come to the Clear River Prefecture. He had not had the time to refine a flying sword of his own. He had carefully chosen this small sword from thousands of spiritual artifacts. Not only was it a high-grade spiritual artifact, but it was also of the water element. The sword itself did not possess any special techniques, except that it was extremely light, extremely fast, and extremely sharp. Li Qingshan held the small sword in his hand. The extremely pure Gui water true qi in his body permeated over and filled the sword. The sword flickered with light, brightening and dimming as if it was breathing rhythmically. Hua Sengzan walked over from the small bridge with Hua Qinglu and Yu Zijian behind him. Hua Qinglu was currently grumbling. "Seriously, there's so much going on, yet you didn't call us over." She knew what she had missed out on last night, so she was filled with regret. Hua Sengzan shushed her gently and pointed at Li Qingshan, who sat by the stream nearby. "Li Qingshan, he's really at the 6th layer now," Hua Qinglu said in surprise. When they last met, he was only at the 2nd layer. In just a few months, he had crossed 4 layers consecutively. His speed was startling. During this period of time, she had never slacked off on her cultivation either, but she was only at the 4th layer. Of course, this was already quite impressive at her age. "What's he doing?" Yu Zijian asked curiously. Although only a few months had passed, everything she had experienced made her feel like the island of cherishing flowers was already extremely distant. The young man who sat there without moving could only be regarded as a stranger. Hua Sengzan said, "He's refining a flying sword. Chenglu, you don't have to be envious. His cultivation speed is fast, but his foundation is rather unstable. His true qi isn't pure enough either, so this step will be much more difficult." It was not that the Hua family did not have a way to push Hua Qinglu to an even higher realm of cultivation, but there would definitely be many repercussions from this method of seeking instant success. Moreover, her foundation would be unstable, and her true qi would be impure. Her cultivation would become more and more difficult. Before Hua Sengzan had even finished speaking, Yu Zijian pointed at Li Qingshan and said, "It's flying." Hua Sengzan suddenly looked back, only to see the tiny sword in Li Qingshan's hand shoot into the air, with a swish before turning back, with a swish. It pierced through a fake mountain silently before returning to Li Qingshan's side, hovering in front of him. Hua Sengzan's insight was extremely shrewd. Although the flying sword was still rather stiff when it turned around, and was not smooth enough, achieving something like this on his first time riding a sword was basically unbelievable. In particular, he noticed that just now the flying sword had actually flown over 100 paces away. It had completely exceeded the distance regular 6th layer qi practitioners could ride their swords. It was on par with 7th or even 8th layer qi practitioners. This only meant one thing. Li Qingshan's true qi was extremely pure. Hua Sengzan rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly in response to Hua Qinglu's doubtful gaze. She really had no idea how he cultivated. Even though there were many spiritual medicines that could purify true qi, it was impossible for it to reach such a level of purity. Qi practitioners still needed to spend large amounts of time tempering it, and once he purified his true qi, it would lengthen the time he spent cultivating. He probably really had been cultivating day and night in the past few months. Sure enough, there were many aspects about him that surpassed ordinary people for her to value him so highly. No matter how clever Hua Sengzan was, he would never have imagined that Li Qingshan possessed a Sumeru ring that even Foundation establishment cultivators could not possess. Moreover, he could absorb the spiritual qi of the world as a qi practitioner. Li Qingshan had noticed Hua Sengzan and the other's arrival a long time ago. However, he was too focused on riding his sword to divert his attention. He formed a seal with his hand, and the sea of qi in his dantian constantly surged. There was a profound connection between him and the flying sword, allowing it to move about freely. It pierced through rock and would with startling might, demonstrating the power that a high-grade spiritual artifact should possess. The reason why he could grasp the art of controlling artifacts so quickly was because his pure, true qi played a decisive role. Water was soft by nature. Although it was not good for attacking, it was extremely gentle and easy to control. Furthermore, without a body of pure, true qi, it would be difficult to refine a high-grade spiritual artifact in such a short period of time. After a rough estimation, he could now control his sword at a distance of about 100 steps. He could truly behead someone within 100 steps. Once he exceeded this distance, his power would be greatly reduced, and he might even lose control. He did not know how long it would take for him to reach the realm of beheading someone from 100 miles away. However, he was already very satisfied with this power. He also understood more and more why the art of body tempering had declined. How much effort did body tempering cultivators have to put in to make their own speed faster than this small flying sword? Even if the sword was made of steel, it would still be useless. After refining the flying sword, Li Qingshan stood up and said with a smile, "You're here." The small sword moved and retracted into his sleeve. It circled around his arm like an armband. As the first flying sword he controlled, it would be his primary method of attack in the human world in the future. He obviously had to carry it on him constantly and familiarize himself with it from time to time so that he could wield it freely. Just now was the time to stop. Hua Sengzan and the other two made their way over just now. Li Qingshan greeted Hua Chenglu gently. "Young Miss Hua, long time no see. I will never forget the help you provided me with back then. I've been thinking of ways to repay you." Now that he thought about it, the two of them had both supported him once, and it had all been against the door. Hua Chenglu smiled reservedly. "Back then it was nothing much. There's no need to call me young miss. You can just call me by my name. After tomorrow, we'll be fellow students. Please take good care of me then, Qingshan." Li Qingshan said, "Your sister's bearing is even greater than yours, Qingzan." Hua Sengzan smiled. "Exactly. That's what everyone else says. I can't help but sigh at my own inferiority." Hua Chenglu had always been quick-witted, so how could she not tell that the two of them were teasing her? She immediately refused. There was nothing Hua Sengzan could do about his younger sister. Yu Zijian pursed her lips into a smile. Only then did she display her usual naivety. "And miss you long time no see." Li Qingshan saw that Yu Zijian was still dressed in violet, but her bearing had become much calmer. A sword hung by her waist, making her seem valiant and heroic. She asked in concern, Big Brother Li, I heard that the sect wants to deal with you. Are you fine?" "I'm fine." Li Qingshan sighed and sighed. Back underground, he called her Niu Juxia, but now he called her Big Brother Li. Chapter 276. Hua Chenglu was still a child after all. She sighed in amazement as she looked at the other folk. "Mu Kuei, that's a nice sword. What's it called?" Although Hua Sengzan had seen many high-grade spiritual artifacts before, he knew how precious they were. Regular qi practitioners would be fortunate to possess a single one when they reached the 8th or 9th layer. Li Qingshan said. I obtained one out of luck, but I don't know its name. Oh, right. What's the name of this stream? It doesn't have a proper name. It's just a stream, Li Qingshan said. All right, then I'll call this sword the Clear Stream Sword. High-grade spiritual artifacts were good, but they were nothing in his eyes. He could afford the price of a supreme-grade spiritual artifact right now, but there was no need for him to be so wasteful. Using the Clear Stream Sword as a starting point was already very impressive. It was a stream right now, but it would definitely become a great river in the future. Hua Sungzan said. Where's little N? Li Qingshan said. He's still sleeping. In reality, little N was originally waiting on one side, but he sensed their arrival. So he hid back in the pavilion. Hua Sungzan knew that Li Qingshan had already made up his mind. He would not let little N join the school, so he stopped trying to persuade him. Have you decided? Do you want to join the school of he? Didn't you want me to join the school of legalism? If you're willing to join, I'll obviously be happy. If you're unwilling, I won't force you either. We'll talk about tomorrow's matters tomorrow. Tomorrow arrived very soon. A spring rain that was as thin as a cow's hair fell from the sky. The air was moist and cool, and the surrounding scenery seemed particularly fresh too. Perhaps because he practiced Gui water, true Qi, he liked this weather very much. The climate of the Clear River Prefecture was rather similar to the Jiangnan of his past life. Looking down from the cloud, the ground was crisscrossed with a web of water. Many farmers were currently transplanting rice seedlings in the paddy fields. It was a scene of a water village. Seeing such a small cloud fly low in the sky, the farmers didn't show any expressions of surprise. The existence of a cultivator. It was not a secret in this world. As people who lived close to the Clear River Prefecture, their horizons were much broader than those who lived in Qingyang City or Jiaping City, so they no longer found it strange after seeing it many times. Compared to that, transplanting seedlings was a little more important. That would determine a year's harvest. Only the children raised their heads and pointed at the cloud. They even ran with it for a while. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Today was the entrance examination for the 100 schools of thought. Li Qingshan did not travel with Hua Qinglu. Apart from Hua Qinglu and Yu Zijian, there were other descendants of the Hua family who would also be entering the 100 schools of thought this year, so there was no point in staying together. They only agreed to meet in front of the 100 schools of thought. The 100 schools of thought was around 50 kilometers away from Clear River City. It was not particularly close, nor was it particularly far. If he rode the clouds, he could arrive in under 2 hours. Li Qingshan was not in a hurry. He leisurely traveled half the distance. Suddenly, he felt a sharp killing intent coming from the ground. The ground was a series of small, undulating hills. There were barely any traces of people within several dozen kilometers, so it was a perfect place for an ambush. On one of the hills stood a gray-haired man in luxurious violet clothes. His cultivation was a startling 10th-layer Qi practitioner. He happened to be the vice sect master of the school, Wei Zhongyuan. He was displeased with Begonia's decision. He had to avenge his son's death. It did not take him much effort. He found out that Li Qingshan was in the Hua family and was about to enroll in the 100 schools of thought. He was afraid of barging into the Hua family to demand for him, but once Li Qingshan entered the 100 schools of thought, there was nothing he could do to him anymore. As a result, he made up his mind and stood guard along the way. Even if he could not capture Li Qingshan alive and interrogate him about everything, he still had to kill him to vent his hatred. The only thing he worried about was Li Qingshan traveling with the Hua family. However, when he saw Li Qingshan appear alone, he was overjoyed. Killing intent erupted from him. At that moment, his eyes were filled with fury. His violet clothes ruffled despite the absence of wind. He was awe-inspiring like a mountain. Li Qingshan could tell with a single glance that he was a 10th-layer Qi practitioner. Although he did not know Wei Zhongyuan's identity, he could guess who he was. He stopped in the clouds and asked loudly, "Are you the vice sect master of the school, Wei Zhongyuan? Get down here." Wei Zhongyuan raised his hand, and white true Qi condensed in his palm. A streak of white light rushed into the air. That streak of white light instantly reminded Li Qingshan of how Pingyang's Yellow Dragon's cannon of devouring light. That streak of white light was shockingly fast. Even if it was on the ground, it would not be easy to dodge it, let alone in the sky. However, although he was shocked, he did not panic. He carried little and leaped into the air. He was secretly shocked when he saw the streak of white light piercing through the clouds. His body fell to the ground. The fog-treading technique required time to condense, and Wei Zhongyuan obviously would not give him the time. Wei Zhongyuan waved his sleeves backward. The mountain rocks under his feet shattered, and rocks flew everywhere. He was already like a cannonball, rushing towards the place where Li Qingshan landed. He opened his right hand and made another move, intending to capture Li Qingshan alive. However, at that moment, Li Qingshan's figure suddenly disappeared. Invisibility talisman, insignificant skill. Wei Zhongyuan snorted coldly, and then his expression changed slightly. This was because Li Qingshan's aura had also disappeared without a trace. Even with his cultivation of Qi practitioner level 10, he could not grasp it. He raised his hands and threw 100 punches in a row at the place where Li Qingshan might land. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosions rang out, and a layer of a small mountain was directly shaved off. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, but there was no trace of Li Qingshan. His frown deepened. It was not a big deal to be able to conceal his figure, but to be able to conceal his aura so cleanly, he must have cultivated some kind of secret technique. If he did not get rid of this person, he would definitely become a great threat in the future. Therefore, he held his breath and concentrated. No matter what kind of secret technique it was, once it was used, there would definitely be a leak of aura. Even if it stirred up an unnatural breeze, he would be able to sense it and break through Li Qingshan's concealment technique. Li Qingshan had obviously used the glazed mirror of invisibility to conceal himself. Seeing how Wei Zhongyuan guarded below like a furious lion, he knew something was amiss. He raised his hand and summoned the Clear Stream sword. The Clear Stream sword hovered in the air, and he stood on it. Even though he was still far from being able to use the art of sword flight, it was not difficult to support his weight. The only thing he needed to consider was how he was supposed to deal with Wei Zhongyuan. If regular Qi practitioners faced such a terrifying enemy, they would definitely think about how to flee. However, what Li Qingshan considered was how to kill him. Coupled with the 100 treasures pouch of a 10th-layer Qi practitioner, his chances of reaching Demon General would definitely increase. However, this place seemed to be desolate, and both the 100 schools of thought and the Clear River Prefecture were too close. Transforming into a demon was extremely dangerous, but right now he was out in the open, while Wei Zhongyuan was hidden in the shadows. However, right now he was out in the open, while Wei Zhongyuan was hidden. With Xiao An's assistance, almost 10 supreme grade talismans, and the cursive sword calligraphy, it was not impossible for him to succeed. Oh, right, there was also his newly learned sword manipulation technique. The Clear Stream sword turned into a green arc, stabbing towards the back of Wei Zhongyuan's neck. Wei Zhongyuan suddenly turned around and smiled viciously. "Found you. The Legends of the Great Sage, welcome to the readers. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.